It was one of those nights where the road feels endless, like it stretches straight to the middle of nowhere with no sense of time or distance. I'd been driving for hours, the highway empty except for the occasional deer crossing or the distant flicker of a taillight far behind me. The radio was dead, nothing but static and the hum of the engine. I remember thinking how quiet it was, almost too quiet, like the world itself had decided to take a deep breath and hold it. I'd just passed the 23rd mile marker when I saw her. At first, I thought it was a trick of the headlights, a shadow or a jacket caught in the wind. But she was standing there, thumb out, looking straight at me. She didn't wave or move like a normal person might when signaling a car. She just stood, staring. I slowed down, rolling my window halfway. Evening, I said, trying to sound casual, though my hand tightened on the wheel. She didn't answer, didn't blink, didn't even flinch. She looked smaller in person, younger than I expected, maybe 16, 17 at most, pale skin, dark hair hanging straight down. Her clothes were simple, nothing fancy, almost like she'd been living in them for days. Need a ride? I asked, more to break the silence than anything else. Still nothing. There's something unnerving about someone refusing to speak in a situation like that. It shouldn't be terrifying, not logically. She was just a kid, but the lack of response, it twists your thoughts, makes your mind crawl into places it shouldn't. You start wondering if they're sick, crazy, or worse. I unlocked the passenger door. Come on, you can sit in the back if you want. Won't be long, I'm headed south. Her eyes flicked the door for a brief second, then back at me, and she got in without a word. That's when the smell hit me, clean, like rain on asphalt, but faintly metallic underneath like iron. I shook it off, told myself it was nothing. I glanced at her in the rearview mirror. She wasn't looking at me, wasn't looking out the window either, just sitting there, hands folded in her lap, staring at the floorboard. I tried again. You okay back there? No answer. We drove in silence. The kind of silence that presses against your ears, your chest, makes the hum of the tires on asphalt too loud. I tried talking again, casually this time. Name's Harris. I've been patrolling this stretch for nearly 10 years. Longest route in the county. You get lost out here, and it's easy to disappear. Hard to believe someone your age would be hitchhiking out here. Still nothing. I felt my stomach tighten. Part of me wanted to keep going, drop her off at the next gas station, call it in. Another part, the part that wasn't entirely rational, wanted to drive until I reached the end of the road, to see what this was all about. I kept my eyes on the dark highway ahead. The lines on the road seemed to stretch farther with every passing second, twisting and bending like they weren't really there. The silence made me talk more than I normally would. You know, it's dangerous out here. Coyotes, bad weather, and I stopped. I didn't know why. Something about the way she sat, her posture, made my voice falter. It wasn't a normal fear. Not the kind you get when you see a car coming fast in the rain, or when a tire blows. This was the kind that sits on your shoulders and whispers that you're alone in the dark, even though there's someone in the back seat. We passed the old gas station at mile 45. I used to stop there sometimes, grab a cup of coffee. It had been abandoned for years, but at night, it always gave me the creeps. Lights flickering inside, though there were no bulbs, shadows that moved against the walls. Tonight, it was just dark, empty, silent. I stole another glance at her. Something about the angle of her head caught my attention, like she was slightly tilting it toward the window, but her eyes were still fixed downward. I realized she hadn't blinked in a while. Not once. My throat went dry. Do you want water? Food? I asked, even though I didn't have any in the car. Just saying the words made me feel ridiculous. Nothing. I pulled off the highway at a rest stop up ahead, the kind with broken lights and a single payphone that probably didn't work, the kind where you half expect the air to vibrate with ghosts of the past. I parked under a flickering lamp, my heart hammering. Look, you don't have to ride with me if you don't want, I said. I can take you to a safer spot. She finally looked up at me, eyes black, wide, unblinking, and then she smiled, not a normal smile, It was slow, deliberate, and it felt like it reached through me, past the skin, into something deep I didn't want anyone to see. I swallowed hard and nodded, trying to tell myself I wasn't imagining things. "Okay," I said, "we'll just stay in the car a minute." I kept the engine running. The radio static hissed faintly. Outside, the wind picked up, rustling the few dead leaves that had blown onto the asphalt. I felt a chill run down my spine, the kind that makes your teeth ache. And all the while, she just sat there, smiling that same unnatural smile. Time became slippery after that. Minutes stretched, became hours. I found myself staring at her without thinking, trying to figure out if she was human or some trick my tired mind was playing on me. I thought about turning on the dome light, but something in the way she watched me made me hesitate. I wondered what her life had been like. Did she wander here often, this stretch of highway in the dead of night? Or was tonight her first time? And if it was her first time, why did she feel so familiar, like a memory I couldn't place? I kept one hand on the wheel, the other drumming nervously against the console. Every sound, car tires hitting a crack in the pavement, a distant owl hoot, made my chest tighten. I could feel the pulse of the road under the tires, slow and steady, like it was alive. Then I saw it, a small reflection in the rearview mirror. Not her, not exactly, but something moving behind her in the back seat. I jerked my eyes, but she was just sitting there, hands folded, smile unchanged. My skin crawled. I told myself it was my imagination. Had to be. The wind picked up again, rattling the doors and windows. I realized I couldn't remember when the last car had passed. Nothing. No headlights, no sound of engines. I had been driving alone for hours, yet here she was, riding silently, smiling. I pulled back onto the highway, trying to force my thoughts elsewhere. Focus on the road, I told myself. Focus on keeping control. But something had changed. The world outside felt muted, like colors had been drained. Even the moon, peeking weakly from behind clouds, didn't illuminate the road properly. Everything was off, wrong in a way I couldn't explain. "Do you live around here?" I asked, voice barely more than a whisper. Her smile deepened. That's when I realized she wasn't going to answer. Not tonight. Not ever. And suddenly, the thought hit me hard. I had no idea who she was, where she came from, or what she wanted. And for the first time in 10 years of highway patrol, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Completely, utterly powerless. I kept driving, the hum of the tires on asphalt, the chill in the car, and that impossible, knowing smile following me down the empty road. I didn't know how far we'd go before the night swallowed us whole, but I knew one thing. The highway had never felt more alive, and I had never felt more alone. The road never seemed to end. Even after I'd passed the old rest stop and gotten back on the highway, the darkness felt heavier, thicker, like it was pressing down through the roof of the patrol car. I kept my hands on the wheel, knuckles white, staring straight ahead, telling myself to focus on the road. But every so often, I couldn't help it. My eyes flicked to the rearview mirror, and that's when I started seeing things. At first, it was subtle. Shadows in the corners of the mirror, movements that didn't belong to her. I'd catch a glimpse of a face, or a figure standing just behind her seat, and when I blinked, or forced myself to look again, there was nothing, only the faint hum of the tires, the glow of the taillights stretching behind me, and her pale, silent figure in the back. I tried to tell myself it was my imagination. It had to be. Long hours on the road, staring at the same stretch of asphalt, the monotony lulling your mind into tricks. But it wasn't just shadows. There was a feeling, like being watched, like someone was leaning over my shoulder without touching me. And that sense didn't leave when I focused on the road. I swallowed hard, shaking off the chill creeping up my spine. "It's nothing," I muttered to myself. Just tired. But the whisper started soon after. Soft, faint, almost drowned in the hum of the engine, but unmistakable. Low voices, murmuring words I couldn't quite catch at first. They didn't come from the radio. They didn't come from her. They came from everywhere and nowhere, as if the night itself had learned how to speak. I strained to listen. The more I tried to focus on them, the more my stomach twisted. The voices were patient, circling my ears, teasing. Sometimes it sounded like they were repeating my own thoughts back to me, saying the things I'd buried down deep, the fears I thought I'd forgotten. I tried to turn on the dome light. I wanted to see her clearly. Maybe if I could get a solid look at her face, the whispers would stop, but the light didn't work. Flickered once, then died. I leaned forward, testing the switch again, heart hammering. Nothing. I glanced at her in the mirror. She was still looking down at the floorboard. But then, almost imperceptibly, I noticed the shadow behind her shift again. A fleeting shape, darker than the darkness around it, lingering just out of focus. My throat went dry. I gripped the wheel tighter. "This isn't real," I whispered. "It's not real. It's not real." I tried to focus on the road, but the whispers grew louder, or maybe I was just listening harder. Words started to form, fractured, broken. My name, my mistakes, things I hadn't told anyone, things I couldn't tell anyone. And then I realized I wasn't alone, not in the sense of her presence. Something else was here, in the car, in the space between us. A weight pressing on my chest, a cold that didn't belong to the night air. I could feel in my bones, a pulse that wasn't mine. I slowed the car, letting it roll with the tires, trying to convince myself that stopping might help. The voices didn't fade. If anything, they got sharper, closer. Whispers echoing the exact things I'd thought about. Moments when I'd failed, when I hadn't saved someone, when I'd driven past accidents and called them routine. I closed my eyes for a second, just a second, and when I opened them, the rearview mirror showed something I couldn't explain. Not her, not me, not a reflection I recognized. A face, pale and twisted, pressed just against the glass, staring back at me. Mouth moving, but no sound came out. Eyes wide, empty, hollowed. I jerked my head back, my heart pounding so hard, I thought it would break ribs. But the face was gone. Just her, still sitting, hands folded, smiling that same impossible smile. I told myself I was hallucinating. Sleep deprivation, hunger, the highway playing tricks. I've dealt with worse. But even when I reasoned it out, even when I repeated it like a mantra in my head, the feeling didn't leave. Something had entered the car with us. Something that didn't belong. I kept driving, trying to focus on the white line stretching into darkness. But the whispers never stopped. At one point, I thought I heard her name. Or maybe I imagined it. The way the road twisted under the headlights. The way the shadows clung to the edges of the mirrors made it impossible to tell what was real and what wasn't. I pulled over to turn out, hoping a few minutes of fresh air or just stopping the car would calm my nerves. Engine idling. I leaned back in my seat and rubbed my eyes. That's when I noticed it. The shadows in the mirror. They were moving differently now. Not with the car. Not with her. Independent. Watching me. Waiting. I felt like I was being measured, analyzed, like something beyond human understanding was studying me. I wanted to get out, to run, but my legs were heavy, stiff, as if the air itself had locked them down. And the whispers, they started forming words now. Not clear sentences, just fragments. Don't leave, watch, wait. Little pieces that stuck in my head like splinters, refusing to be ignored. I tried shaking my head, telling myself to wake up, to snap out of it, to stop listening. But it was too late. My mind had accepted that the car wasn't just carrying her. I tried to talk to her. "Are you hearing this?" My voice sounded small, distant, swallowed by the hum of the tires. She didn't respond. Never did. Not a single glance. Not a blink. Just that smile, patient, unchanging, like she was part of the machinery of this nightmare. Time blurred. Minutes stretched into something that didn't make sense. Every time I glanced at the rear view, the shadows had shifted closer. I could swear I saw arms, thin and long, creeping along the edges, but every time I blinked, nothing was there. I gripped the wheel until my knuckles bled, whispering to myself like a prayer. "You're alone. You're alone. You're alone." But I wasn't. Something had crossed over. Something that didn't belong on a highway, in a patrol car, at this hour of the night. Something patient, watching, waiting. And then, the strangest part, I started hearing her voice. Not loud, not words I could understand. Just a breath, soft, almost a sigh, like it was brushing against my ear. My heart froze. I leaned forward, straining to catch it. But when I looked back, she was just sitting there, quiet, hands folded, smiling. I don't know how long we drove after that. The road stretched endlessly, dark and empty. Shadows in the mirrors, whispers in the air, that impossible smile in the back seat. I could feel the night pressing and thickening, stretching time in ways I didn't understand. And I kept telling myself, keep driving, just keep driving. Eventually, it'll end. Eventually, you'll get back to a place where this doesn't matter. But the shadows, the whispers, they didn't leave. And I knew, deep down, that even if the car stopped, even if she disappeared, the highway had marked me now. Something had seen me, studied me, and maybe it would follow me off the asphalt into the world I thought was safe. I kept driving, and I knew I wasn't alone. I thought I had gotten used to the silence by then, the weight of the night pressing down to the roof of a patrol car, through my shoulders, into my chest. I'd started telling myself that the shadows, the whispers, were tricks, fatigue playing games on my mind. Long nights alone on the highway had done this before, but tonight it felt different, like the world itself had shifted, and I was the only one left in the wrong place. I glanced at the rearview mirror again. She was there, or at least she had been, and then she wasn't. It happened without warning. One moment her dark hair was hanging over her face, hands folded neatly in her lap. The next, the seat was empty. The air felt colder, heavier, like the car had grown a new silence, thick and choking. My stomach dropped, my hands tightening on the wheel. I slammed on the brakes instinctively, skidding slightly on the worn asphalt. My eyes darted around, scanning the rear view, the back seat, every shadow that clung to the edges of the headlights. Nothing, not a trace. The seatbelt dangled, empty, just her, gone. I swallowed hard, trying to tell myself it was a trick, a blink, a hallucination from fatigue. But no, there was something new, something unmistakable. A message scrawled across the dashboard with a shaky hand in black ink, fresh and glaring in the dim light. It wasn't written neatly. The letters were jagged, uneven, like someone had been trembling while writing. And the words, I don't even know if they were meant to be words. They were simple, but they hit me like a physical blow. Don't look back. I blinked, hands frozen, eyes locked on the dashboard. My mind screamed, trying to explain. Maybe someone had put it there earlier. But the dashboard had been spotless when I left the rest stop. I remembered checking it. I remember the dull shine of the plastic. Nothing else. This was new. Too new. And the air in the car felt heavier, charged, like static before a storm. I tried to laugh it off, a hollow, nervous sound that bounced off the car doors and disappeared into the night. Yeah, okay, I muttered. It's just someone playing a joke. But my voice sounded small, weak, and even as I said it, I knew I hadn't imagined her leaving. She hadn't run out. There was no knock on the window, no sound of a door, just vanished. I pressed my palm to the dashboard, over the scrawled words, feeling the ink smear slightly under my fingers. The letters weren't dry. They were fresh, impossible, and the smell, the same faint metallic, iron-like scent that had lingered before, was stronger now, more intense, pressing into my senses. I leaned back, trying to steady my breathing. My pulse was hammering in my ears, each beat echoing against the steel walls of the car. I kept telling myself to calm down. It's nothing. It's just the road. Just tired eyes. But the emptiness in the back seat felt alive, like it had been watching me, waiting for me to notice, knowing I would. I reached over cautiously, testing the door handle behind me. Empty. The air seemed thicker there, heavier. I rubbed my eyes, thinking about what I'd seen earlier in the rear view. The shadows, the whispers, the impossible, unblinking eyes. And now this. A warning, clear and direct. I forced myself to start the car again, hands trembling. The tires hummed on the asphalt. the faint glow of the headlights cutting through the night. I told myself to focus on the road, to ignore the dashboard, but my eyes kept flicking back. That simple phrase, "Don't look back," etched itself into my mind, looping endlessly. I started talking to myself, out loud this time, almost in desperation. "You're fine. You're fine. It's just someone messing with you. That's all." But the sound of my own voice felt alien, distant, like it didn't belong to me. I realized I was shaking, my hands white on the wheel, my chest tight. The highway stretched on endlessly, black and empty, the lines in the asphalt glowing faintly under the headlights. I tried to keep my mind on simple things. Speed, markers, the rhythm of the tires. But it was impossible. Every shadow seemed deeper now, moving in ways I hadn't before. The whispers returned, faint, fractured, echoing the words in my head. "Don't look back. Don't look back." I glanced at the rear view once more. Nothing. Empty seat. No sign of her. But I could feel it. Something else. Something close. Something patient. Watching. Waiting. I remembered something from years ago. A case I had worked when I was just starting as a highway patrolman. A missing girl. Late at night. Alone on the road. Vanished without a trace. I hadn't thought about her in years. Hadn't remembered the details. But now, sitting here, staring at the empty seat, the inked warning on the dashboard, I couldn't shake the memory. Her eyes, pale in the moonlight, refusing to blink. That same impossible, quiet presence. I swallowed hard, trying to focus on the road ahead. But every time I glanced at the dashboard, the letters seemed to twitch, almost imperceptibly, like they were alive. I forced myself to look away, staring straight ahead, but the feeling of being watched didn't leave. It pressed down to the steering wheel, the seat, into my bones. I tried the radio. Anything to break the tension, to anchor myself to reality. Static at first, then the faint hum of another station. Voices, words, nothing I recognized. But the sound of human speech, even disjointed, made my chest relax just slightly. Not much, but enough to keep going. I passed another mile marker, then another. The road seemed endless. The empty highway stretched into infinity. My mind tried to rationalize. Maybe she had slipped out while I wasn't looking. Maybe it had all been a trick of the light. The road, my own exhaustion. Maybe, but the scrawled words on the dashboard, fresh, deliberate, wouldn't let me believe it. I kept driving. The whispers never stopped. They didn't form words this time, just tones, low and soft, circling my ears like smoke. I could feel them brushing against my mind, tugging at thoughts I hadn't wanted to face in years. I clenched my fists, telling myself not to listen, not to think, just to focus. But then I saw something. Out of the corner of my eye, in the darkness behind the car, a shadow moved. Not fast, but deliberate. Following, I turned my head quickly, try and catch it in the headlights. Nothing, but the feeling remained, a weight, a presence. I remembered the rest stop again. The abandoned gas station, the flickering lights, the stories old-timers used to tell me about that stretch of highway. Ghosts, disappearances, legends I had dismissed years ago. But sitting here, alone in my car, facing the empty seat, hearing the whispers, I couldn't dismiss them anymore. Time became slippery. Minutes stretched, warped. I tried to focus on the lines in the asphalt, on the markers flashing past. But the shadows in the mirrors seemed to move with me, always just at the edge of vision. And the dashboard, the words seemed darker now, more urgent. I dared to glance at it once. The letters hadn't changed, but the message felt heavier, like it carried weight I couldn't lift. Don't look back. My stomach twisted, my throat dry. Every instinct screamed at me to obey. But the part of me that wanted answers, that wanted to understand, fought back. I told myself to keep driving. Don't stop. Don't turn around. Just keep going. The road would lead somewhere eventually. It always did. But I couldn't shake the feeling that the moment I looked away, the highway itself would close in on me, swallowing everything familiar. I drove for hours like that. Empty seat behind me. Shadows clinging to the edges of vision. whispers brush in my mind, and the words on the dashboard, black and jagged, like a scar I couldn't erase. Don't look back. Eventually, I stopped. I had to. I couldn't keep my hands steady anymore. Engine idling, tires humming on the asphalt. I sat there, staring at the dashboard. The words, that empty seat, that impossible, silent presence. And I realized something I didn't want to admit. She wasn't just gone. Something had come in her place. Something that belonged to the highway, to the night, to the dark space between reality and whatever this was. And it had left a message for me. Don't look back. I couldn't. I stared forward at the endless road, and I kept my hands on the wheel, knowing that whatever had happened, whatever had been here, wasn't finished with me yet. The next morning, the highway felt different. The sun cut through the mist in thin, sharp lines, and the road looked ordinary, just asphalt stretching into the distance, lined with the same cracked mile markers, the same dead grass and twisted trees. But I knew better. I had driven this stretch countless times, seen it under every kind of weather, every kind of night, and now it felt wrong. I parked my cruiser at the rest stop where I'd first seen her. The abandoned gas station, the broken pumps, the cracked windows staring back at me, empty and lifeless. I stepped out, boots crunching on gravel, and tried to make sense of what had happened. The rear seat was empty, yes, but that message on the dashboard, "Don't look back," was burned into my memory. It wasn't something you just forget. Something had marked me. Something had been there. I started walking the road, my flashlight cutting through the leftover fog. I tried to remember the exact spot where I'd picked her up, tracing the lines of asphalt with my eyes. There was nothing, no footprints, no sign of anyone ever being there. Just a cold, empty highway, stretching endlessly in both directions. I thought about calling dispatch, logging the incident, but what would I say? A girl appeared, disappeared, left a warning on the dashboard, and vanished into thin air? They'd call me crazy. And maybe I had imagined it all. But the memory of her smile, that impossible, silent smile, wouldn't let me pretend it hadn't happened. I drove slowly up and down the stretch, scanning every turnoff, every side road. Something pulled me toward the older section of the highway, the part that had been bypassed years ago when they built the wider lanes. It was narrower, rougher, the asphalt cracked and uneven, and for some reason, I felt like I needed to see it, to understand. Pulling off onto the gravel shoulder, I got out and walked, flashlight in hand. The air smelled different here. Damp, earthy, with a hint of something metallic, like blood, faint but unmistakable. My stomach tightened. I swallowed hard and tried to keep my mind on the task. Check the road, look for clues, find answers. That's when I noticed the markers. Old ones, weathered, half-broken, leaning at odd angles. Each had a name etched in, faded, nearly illegible. But something made me read them, one after another. Names of people reported missing along this stretch over the past 40 years. Teenagers, hitchhikers, travelers, all gone, never found. Some were listed as runaways. Others just vanished without explanation. I felt my pulse quicken. My hands trembled as I reached for my radio, dialing dispatch almost absent-mindedly. I didn't even know if I was speaking aloud, just mumbling the names. Each one matched what I had seen in her. Her age, her look, the way she had stood there. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized her disappearance wasn't the first. I sat down on the cracked asphalt, my back against the cruiser, and tried to process it. 40 years of missing people, all along this stretch, all similar circumstances. Young, traveling alone, vanishing without a trace. And now me, I felt a cold trickle of fear slide down my spine. I hadn't vanished. Not yet. But had I been marked? Did she mark me? Or whatever had been with her? I opened my notebook and started jotting down names, dates, and details I could remember from old dispatch logs. Pages filled with strangers I never knew, but now felt intimately connected to. I kept thinking about her, about that smile, about the weight of the silence and the whispers. She wasn't just a hitchhiker. She was a warning, or maybe a herald, something from the road itself. something that collected these people one after another. My mind kept drifting back to the seatbelt, dangling empty, like a cruel reminder of her presence. And the message on the dashboard, "Don't look back." What had it meant? Had I ignored it and survived? Or had I been spared just this once, until the road decided otherwise? I tried to shake off the unease, telling myself I needed concrete evidence. The highway had records, cameras, mile markers, witnesses. But the more I looked, the more I realized the stretch of road was designed to be forgotten. Older cameras have been dismantled, reports buried, old case files collecting dust in the archives. Everything was here, but hidden, waiting. That night, back at the station, I pored over old files. Each case was eerily similar. Young people hitchhiking or walking alone. Disappearances between mile markers 20 and 50. A few witnesses described seeing someone like her. Silent, small, dark hair, pale skin, standing by the side of the road. The reports called them unidentified figures or strange hitchhikers. Some officers had even speculated about pranks, runaway children, or worse. But no one had ever found them. No one had ever solved it. I closed the file slowly, pressing my hands to my face. Exhaustion settled over me, but my mind refused to rest. The highway was alive with something I couldn't name. Something that moved, waited, and collected. I thought about her again, that impossible, silent smile. I thought about the shadows, the whispers, the feeling of being watched. Sleep didn't come that night. I lay on the bed in my small apartment, staring at the ceiling, listening to the hum of the city outside. I kept imagining the back seat, the empty space where she had been, the way the dashboard had glowed in the dim headlights. The words, "Don't look back." They were etched in my mind now, impossible to erase. I thought about driving back, about retracing the route, marking the mile markers again, searching for any sign that she, or whatever she represented, was still there. But the thought of going back alone made my stomach twist. And yet, I knew I had to. I had to understand. I had to see if this road would give up its secrets, or if it would take me like it had so many before. Days passed. I started logging each call I took, each report of strange sightings along the highway. Drivers mentioning shadows, whispers, or a young girl asking for rides. They were fleeting, brief, dismissed by most, but they all lined up, like pieces of a puzzle that didn't quite fit, but formed a larger, terrifying picture. I couldn't stop thinking about her. I couldn't stop thinking about the emptiness she left behind. And every time I closed my eyes, I saw her in the mirror just for a second. Just that smile, waiting, patient, impossible. And I realized I wasn't just investigating anymore. I was being investigated. The highway had marked me, studied me, and now I was part of its history. The names etched in the old mile markers, the decades of disappearances. They weren't just stories. They were warnings. And somehow, unknowingly, I had joined that line. I started taking notes obsessively, mapping out each disappearance along the highway. Patterns emerged. Certain sections were worse than others. Some nights, certain times of the year. It was methodical, almost intelligent. And I kept thinking about the moment she disappeared. How quiet it had been. How sudden. How deliberate. I realized the whispers weren't gone. Even in broad daylight, even in the office, I could hear them faintly. Low, distant, like wind over the asphalt, repeating fragments of words. My name, a warning, a call. I shook my head and pressed on, trying to focus on the work, trying to rationalize, trying not to think about what I had felt in the car. But I couldn't stop, and I wouldn't, because part of me knew that the moment I turned away completely, I might never see the road again. That part of me, the part that remembered her smile, the whispers, the shadows, knew that whatever haunted that stretch of highway was patient, meticulous, and inevitable. And somewhere deep down, I realized it didn't just want victims. It wanted witnesses. It wanted people who saw, who understood, who could remember. People like me. I couldn't explain it. I didn't want to, but I knew I had to remember. Every detail, every shadow, every whisper, every impossible silent smile. Because one day, someone else would travel that road. and the highway would reach for them. And if I didn't record it, if I didn't warn, they might not survive. So I drove again. I walked the road again. I traced the old mile markers, the abandoned side roads, the cracks in the asphalt. I looked for any sign, any trace, any clue. And I knew, somewhere out there, she or it was waiting, patient, silent, watching. The highway had taken before. It would take again. And I was still here. For now, it's late. Or maybe it's early. Hard to tell out here. The highway stretches ahead like a black ribbon under the half-faded moon, and my headlights cut through the fog in stiff, shaky beams. I keep glancing at the dash, at the mile markers ticking by 76, 77, 78. That stretch near 77 has always had a way of creeping into your head. Accidents, flares, cars spun out, wrecked, with nothing else around for miles. People say it's the road, the curve, the pitch of the asphalt. I say it's something else. Something that waits. The night is quiet. Too quiet. Even the wind seems cautious, rustling the trees in whispers instead of howls. I can see my reflection in the side mirror, eyes red from hours on the road, jaw tight, hands gripping the wheel like the steering might shake loose if I loosen my grip. Every so often I reach for my radio, but it's dead, static, just the way I like it when I'm alone out here. Alone, except for the road. And whatever else hides around mile marker 77. I remember the first accident I saw there. The smell of burnt rubber. The faint copper blood on the asphalt. I pulled over, flashlight in hand, and found a car sideways, engine smoking, the driver slumped over the wheel. I called it in, shook hands with the paramedics who rolled in like ghosts, and left before the sun could see me thinking maybe it wasn't an accident. I never told anyone that part. It sounds crazy, but the pattern is there. Always there. I tap the radio again. Nothing. Static hisses back. The kind of static that crawls under your skin and makes your hair lift. There's a rhythm to it if you listen long enough, almost like it's breathing or whispering. Sometimes, I swear I hear my name in it. Sheriff. Like the night itself is trying to call me. I shake my head. Pull the wheel a little tighter to the right. Eyes forward. Breathe. It's just a road. Just a night shift. Traffic is almost non-existent. Only the occasional truck, lights bright and steady, rumbling past, leaving a ghostly trail of exhaust that clings to the fog. I watch them fade and feel the silence settle in like a living thing. I hate the quiet nights the most. They make the road feel personal, like it knows you're out here alone. Like it's studying you, waiting for you to make a mistake. 77 comes up fast. Mile marker 77. I glance to the side where that small clearing sits, the one with the dead tree leaning slightly like it's listening. The tree's been there for decades, maybe more. Locals call it the Sentinel. Me, I call it a witness. Every accident, every flash of metal bent, every scream carried away by the wind, it's all happened under that tree's watchful branches. I can't explain it. I don't try anymore. Not to anyone. They'd call me crazy. Maybe I am. Maybe the road drives a little of us mad, mile by mile, night by night. I slow down as I pass the marker. Something in the corner of my eye flickers. Could be a shadow. Could be nothing. I blink. The headlights catch something metallic near the edge of the road. A sign or a piece of a car. Hard to tell. My pulse quickens just a little. I tell myself it's imagination. Always imagination when it's too dark to see clearly. But that tightening in my chest doesn't lie. My hands grip the wheel like they're holding on to the last piece of sanity I have left. Memories sneak in. A teenager, barely 16. She lost control last month. I found her in the ditch. Phone clutched to her chest like she could still call someone, anyone. Her eyes wide open, staring at something I didn't see. I closed them gently, like you do with someone fragile, and I drove her body away from the road that had taken too much from too many. I couldn't shake the feeling she was still watching, even when she wasn't there. Even now, sometimes at night, I think I see her, just for a second, in the reflection of my rearview mirror. She doesn't speak, doesn't move, just waits. The fog grows thicker. My headlights barely reach past the edges of the road, and the air smells damp like wet leaves and something older, something rotting that doesn't belong. My stomach twists. I try to hum some low, ridiculous tune just to remind myself I'm human. The road doesn't hum back. It only listens. I know it. Every mile I've driven here, it has watched. It remembers. It judges. A truck passes. The rumble shakes the seat beneath me. I glance at the driver. Hard face. Eyes forward. Doesn't see me. Doesn't need to. They never do. Maybe it's better that way. Maybe knowing the road watches you, truly watches, will be worse than ignorance. Maybe everyone who drives through here has felt it, and that's why they hurry past. Or maybe they don't notice until it's too late. I slow again. There's a curve coming up. Mile 77's curve. The one everyone talks about, but no one stops to understand. It's gentle, almost inviting, if you don't know its history. But I do. I know. I can feel the road bending beneath the tires, almost breathing with them, curling like a predator ready to strike. I glance in the mirror again. Nothing. Nothing ever is. Not until it's already too late. I notice the skid marks first. Fresh, dark against the asphalt. Serpentine like some creature slithered across the road in panic. The smell hits me next. Burnt rubber and something faintly metallic. My chest tightens. I know this smell. Too many times. I've smelled it before and seen what follows. A car. Twisted, metal screaming in shapes no human should endure. I tell myself it's coincidence. Again, I always tell myself that. But my heart isn't convinced. I grip the wheel tighter, knuckles white. The silence hums again. Closer this time, like someone is standing behind me. Not in the car. Behind the road itself. I blink, shake my head, and the feeling doesn't leave. Can't leave. The road is patient. Always patient. Watching. Waiting. There's a rhythm here. A pulse in the asphalt. I swear I can feel it through the tires. A heartbeat. A slow, methodical heartbeat that matches mine until I realize mine is racing too fast. The radio crackles. Briefly. Just a whisper sound before it dies again. I lean closer. My own name, maybe, or just the static forming words I hope I imagined. Just if I swallow hard. The fog presses closer, curling around the headlights. The edges of the road blur. Shapes move just beyond the light, and I can't tell if they're real or if I'm remembering the faces of the lost, the broken, the ones who never left. I tell myself I'm not alone. I tell myself it's just the night. The night doesn't answer. It only watches. I reach mile marker 78 and exhale slowly, relief that this stretches behind me. Even as my stomach churns with dread, the road flattens, the fog thins, and I can see the lights of a distant town flicker in the horizon. But mile 77 lingers in my mind. Always will. I know the pattern isn't random. I know the accidents are too frequent, too precise. Something waits there. Something that doesn't tire, doesn't sleep, and it doesn't forgive. Every time I drive this highway, I feel it watching, studying me, testing me. I keep the speed slow, cautious. There's a rhythm to night patrols that I've learned over years. Look ahead, glance behind, listen to hum of tires against asphalt. Keep your wits about you. But tonight, the rhythm feels off. My eyes catch every shadow, every flicker. My hands grip the wheel like I can physically keep the darkness at bay. I tell myself stories about the fog, about the curve, about the history of the road. But the stories don't calm me. They sharpen the edge of fear. By the time I pass the next marker, mile 79, the pulse of the night is still with me. Not gone, not forgotten. It rides alongside the car, unseen, patient, waiting for the next patrol, the next mistake, the next soul careless enough to drive without knowing, without fearing what lingers here. I shake my head and drive on, but the road stays. Always does. It doesn't forgive. It doesn't forget. And I know, deep down, I'll be back. Back at mile marker 77, listening to the hum of the asphalt, waiting for the road to show me what it wants next. I was just finishing my second cup of coffee when the radio crackled. The voice frantic, almost trembling. "Sheriff, you need to get out here." Someone ran across the highway, tire marks. "Oh God, I think they hit them." I slammed my coffee down, heart spiking before my brain even had time to catch up. My boots hit the floor of the cruiser hard, and I tore out onto the road, and I had already fallen deep, thick like a wet blanket over the hills. Mile marker 77 again. Of course it was 77. Every strange call I've gotten out here seems to circle back to that cursed stretch. The dispatcher was still on the line, voice clipped, urgent. Drivers at a stop down the road. Says it was a figure running across. Then the car spun out. He's in shock. I tightened my grip on the wheel. A figure. I didn't want to think about what that meant. Didn't want to think about who or what was wandering across that stretch of asphalt at night. When I arrived, the scene was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that presses against your ears and makes you second guess whether you're breathing or not. A truck had swerved, its tire marks snaking across the road like dark veins, the smell of burnt rubber sharp in the air. I could see the driver still trembling in the cab, hands gripping the wheel, knuckles white. "Can you tell me what happened?" I asked, voice low, steady. It's the only way I know how to keep calm when the night is screaming at me. He pointed shakily at the road. I don't know. Someone ran across. I didn't see a face, just limbs moving too fast. And then I spun out. I followed the marks with my eyes. The road was slick with dew, faintly shining under the headlights, and the tire marks curved in a way that suggested the driver tried to overcorrect it, and lost control. But there was something in the spacing of the marks that didn't make sense. The pattern. It was too precise, too deliberate, like whatever it crossed had known exactly how fast the car would be and where it would go. I knelt by the edge of the asphalt, squinting. There were small impressions, footprints, maybe, but not human. Too long, too thin, with strange gaps between each step. I traced it with my finger, feeling a chill crawl up my spine. They led back into the fog, disappearing into the shadows. I swallowed hard. "Did you see a face?" "Anything?" I asked again, though I already knew the answer. The driver shook his head violently. "No, just a movement." It was fast. Wrong. Not human. His voice cracked on the last word. He wasn't lying. I believed him, even if I didn't want to. I stood, dusting my hands on my pants. The fog had thickened while we talked, curling around the trees like fingers, hiding the darkness beneath. I glanced at mile marker 77 and swallowed. The sentinel tree leaned over the road, black and patient, and I could swear it watched. Everything here watched. And sometimes I wonder if the things it watched ever left. The driver's truck groaned under him, stuck against the curb, and I gestured for him to climb out. "Go back into town," I said. "Get inside. Don't look back." He hesitated, eyes wide, then nodded. Fear made people small, made them human again. I watched him drive off, taillights fading into fog, and then I was alone with the marks, the footprints, the smell of rubber and wet earth, alone with the feeling that something unseen had been watching me since I arrived. I knelt down again, flashlight in hand, tracing the asphalt. The tire marks didn't end where they should have. They bent strangely, as though the car had swerved around something invisible. My stomach turned. I knew these roads. I knew the way vehicles skidded. I had driven every curve 1,000 times. This wasn't normal. A noise made me freeze. Just a single scream, thin and sharp, echoing from the fog. Not the driver's. He was gone, but something else, something closer. The kind of scream that burrows under your ribs and refuses to leave. My pulse jumped. My head snapped toward the sound. Flashlight cutting into the mist. Nothing. Only trees, shadows, and the endless stretch of road. I tried to tell myself it was an animal. Coyotes, maybe, but it wasn't. I know that scream. I've heard it before, though I can't say when or where. It doesn't belong to anything natural. It belongs to fear itself, alive, crawling along the asphalt. I stepped carefully, the flashlight sweeping over the fog. Every shadow seemed to move, just at the edge of vision, like the night itself was breathing, watching. The footprints I traced earlier, thin, stretched wrong, led toward the tree line, bending in impossible ways. I felt my stomach knot. Something had crossed the road, and it hadn't left. Not really. The wind shifted suddenly, cold and biting, carrying the faintest sound, laughter or crying. I couldn't tell. My mouth went dry. I felt like my skin was crawling. I took a step back, and the marks in the asphalt seemed to shimmer, like wet ink reflecting the faint light. I blinked. They were gone. Or maybe they had never been there, except in the corner of my mind. I shook my head, trying to shake the fear too. This stretch of highway had a way of bending perception. People forget things, remember things wrong. But the first scream, the sound that cut through the night like a knife, I would never forget. It lingered in my ears, in my chest, in the muscles of my arms gripping the wheel of the cruiser. I climbed back into the car, doors locking behind me. The engine roared to life, low and steady, grounding me. I drove slowly back toward town, glancing in the mirror every few seconds. Shadows moved differently tonight, slower, almost deliberate. I could feel eyes on me, not human eyes, though sometimes it almost fooled me into thinking they were. The dispatcher's voice came over the radio again, quieter this time. "Sheriff, the driver says he doesn't want to talk anymore. Just keep watch out there." I nodded, even though they couldn't see me. Keep watch. That's all I could do. Keep the patrol slow, methodical, careful. The road wasn't done tonight. It never is. Mile 77 waits for moments like this. Moments when someone sees too much or too little. When the night is patient enough to make you believe you're alone, then reminds you that you're not. As I passed the marker again, I thought I saw something dart between the trees. Thin, too fast, impossible to catch with the eye. I blinked. Nothing. Only fog. Only night. Only the lingering sense that the first scream had not been a warning. It had been an invitation. I remember thinking, as I drove, how fragile we all are, how easily the night can twist perception, how quickly the mind can turn terror into reality. But some things aren't in your mind. The marks on the asphalt, the impossible footprints, the scream, it was all real. All waiting for someone stupid enough to be awake at this hour. By the time I returned to the town limits, my hands ached from gripping the wheel, my stomach knotted, and the echo of that scream still hummed through my chest. I parked at the station, sat in silence for a moment, letting the hum of the engine fade, tried to convince myself it had just been a frightened driver, a trick of the fog. But I know better. I've seen enough. I patrolled this highway long enough to know when something doesn't belong, something that runs across the asphalt, leaving marks no one should be able to explain, something that waits in the fog, patient, hungry for attention, for fear. And deep down, I knew that scream wasn't the last. The highway was empty when I left the station. Empty, except for the fog, curling low over the asphalt like it wanted to pull the tires off the road. Mile marker 77 loomed ahead. I knew it would. Always did. Every call, every strange report always led me back here, back to the stretch of black highway that smelled like wet leaves and old fear. I kept the cruiser slow, headlights cutting through the mist in trembling beams. My coffee from earlier had long gone cold, and my stomach churned with a mix of nerves and anticipation. The radio was dead again, just the usual static. The silence had a pulse to it, almost like it was breathing along with me, matching the rhythm of my heart. Then I saw it. At first, I thought it was a trick of the fog, a shadow stretching too long, too thin, across the center line. But it moved, darting, almost gliding, as if it didn't obey gravity like the rest of us. My hands tightened on the wheel. My pulse spiked. I slowed, eyes wide, hard in my throat. There was again standing or crouching by the side of the road. It had a shape almost human, but nothing about it was right. Limbs too long, torso twisted slightly as if the bones were bent in the wrong directions. It looked at me, or I thought it did, and the world felt like it shifted. I swallowed hard. I want to call it in radio for backup, anything, but my voice wouldn't come. My throat had gone dry. I could feel the heat of adrenaline and fear running like electricity through my arms and chest. The figure moved again, stepping onto the road. I slammed the brakes instinctively. Tires squealed. Fog swirled around the cruiser, and for a moment, I thought I had imagined it, but then the headlights caught it fully. It didn't have a face. Or maybe it did, but it was wrong. Distorted. Shadows twisted across where features should have been. I blinked, and the shape shifted, as though it didn't want me to see it properly. I wanted to look away, wanted to convince myself it was a deer, a trick of the lights, anything ordinary, but my eyes wouldn't obey. The figure moved closer. Its steps were slow, deliberate, but every movement was somehow jerky, as if reality itself resisted it. I felt my chest tighten. My hands shook. I tried to speak, tried to tell it to stop, to get out of the road, but the words got caught in my throat. Then it disappeared. I blinked, and there was nothing but fog, the black asphalt stretching empty before me. The tire marks of a past accident were faint beneath the dew, but the figure, gone. I leaned forward, trying to see further, my flashlight slicing weakly into the mist. Nothing, not a sound except my own breathing and the gentle hum of the engine. I forced my hands to unclench. "It's nothing," I muttered. "Nothing out here." But the words didn't convince me. They sounded hollow, even in my own ears. My mind replayed the last few seconds over and over. Limbs too long, torso twisted, movement that didn't obey physics. A face or not a face, and the way it vanished. I pressed on slowly, every sense screaming at me. Headlights caught the tree lean, and I thought I saw something flicker between the trees. Another shape, or maybe the same one. It didn't matter. My stomach tightened with the realization that I was being watched. Always watched. The highway here had eyes, and whatever was out there had been patient, waiting for someone awake enough, foolish enough, to notice. My mind flashed to the driver from the last call, the panicked man who swore he'd seen someone or something dart across the road. I remembered the scream, thin, high-pitched, lingering in the fog like a warning. The thought made my stomach knot tighter. I had been following this pattern for years. Miles' accidents, screams, shadows, always circling back to mile marker 77. And now I was part of it, part of the pattern, whether I liked it or not. Then I saw movement again, closer this time, directly in the middle of the road, headlights catching the wet asphalt, reflecting the distorted silhouette. My hands gripped the wheels so tightly that I could feel the blood pulsing in my knuckles. The figure seemed to stretch, elongate, almost reaching for the cruiser, and then it stopped, frozen, as though waiting for me to make the next move. I forced my foot off the brake, inching forward slowly. The fog swirled around the headlights. The figure's shape was clearer now, limbs bent at odd angles, chest moving slightly like it was breathing, though the motion seemed wrong, unnatural. I blinked, and the face, or the suggestion of a face, was there. Hollow eyes, shadowed, and a mouth that might have been screaming or might have been nothing at all. I swallowed hard. Every instinct screamed at me to move, to drive, to run. But part of me was frozen, fascinated, unable to look away. The figure, almost human, almost alive, was there, waiting, watching, knowing. I took another cautious step forward, pressing the accelerator slightly. The headlights washed over it again. I braced myself to see it flinch, to see it move. But the moment I leaned forward, it vanished. Gone. Just like that. The fog swallowed it. The road was empty. Only the whisper of the tires over the asphalt and my own ragged breathing. I stopped the cruiser entirely. Engine idling. Eyes scanning the fog. Heart racing. Hands trembling. I could feel sweat pooling in my palms. The kind of fear that seeps into your bones. I wanted to tell myself it was a trick of the lights, a shadow, exhaustion, but I knew better. I had seen enough. I had felt enough. That wasn't human. Memories came rushing back. The panicked driver, the scream, the tire marks, the accidents. I could feel the pulse of the highway, almost like a heartbeat beneath the asphalt. Slow, deliberate, waiting, watching. And now I had seen it. Not a ghost, not exactly. Something else. Something patient. Something hungry for attention. I tried to shake my head. Tried to tell myself it would be gone in the morning. That daylight would restore reason to the stretch of highway. But I couldn't. I felt it lingering in the shadows. The fog curling closer, pressing against the cruiser, reminded me that the first scream was not a warning. It was a greeting, an introduction. The figure appeared again, just at the edge of the headlights, far enough away that I could see the shape, almost entirely human but wrong. It tilted its head, as if curious, examining me. I wanted to speak, wanted to demand it leave, wanted to scream, but no sound came, just the hum of the tires and the fog thickening around us. I blinked. It was gone again. Every time I thought I got a clear look, it vanished, leaving only the suggestion of movement in the fog. I could feel it lingering in my mind, a shadow pressing against my thoughts, seeping into the edges of my memory. I realized I wasn't just observing it. I was being observed, examined, judged. I tried to move the cruiser forward, slowly, cautiously, but the road seemed to stretch, elongate, resist me, every step closer to where the figure had been felt like wading through thick water. The headlights barely cut through fog, and I realized that however far I drove, mile marker 77, and its sentinel tree would be waiting. The road was patient, and the figure was patient, and both would endure long after I left. My chest tightened again. My hands shook. I pressed the accelerator slowly, inching past where it had appeared. Fog swirled in the headlights, shifting unnaturally, like curtains moving in a windless room. I could feel it in my chest now. The figure wasn't gone. It never leaves. It only retreats, folds into the shadows, waits. By the time I passed mile marker 78, my stomach churned, my vision swam slightly with exhaustion and adrenaline, and I realized I hadn't taken a single breath in the last several minutes. The figure's presence lingered in my mind, in the headlights, in the fog. The highway was alive with it, patient, observant, waiting for the next person foolish enough to see. I parked back at the station, hands still shaking, sweat cooling on my forehead. The lights inside were warm, familiar, but the memory of that shape, almost human, almost alive, clung to me like a second skin. I knew it wasn't a dream. I knew it hadn't been exhaustion. I had seen it, felt it, and I knew, in the quiet moments before sleep, I would see it again, in the shadows, in the fog, in the reflections, in the mirror, the ghosts and the headlights. That's what I thought of it then, and I knew it was only the beginning. I shouldn't have gone back. I knew it as soon as I climbed into the cruiser that night. The fog was thicker than usual, low over the asphalt like it was trying to swallow the road hole. Mile marker 77 lay ahead, pale and gleaming under my headlights, and my chest tightened before my mind could even catch up. Every fiber of me knew what had happened the night before the figure, and still, I went. Dispatch was quiet, empty, dead static. It felt intentional, as if the night itself wanted me alone. I tried to shake the thought, force myself to focus on the road. The tires hummed over the asphalt, steady and dull, but the fog pressed close, curling around the cruiser. I could feel it creeping through the gaps in the doors, in the cracks between my boots and the pedals, cold and invasive. I reached mile marker 77, slowing, my heart hammering. I tried to tell myself I was being rational. Stories, legends, highway folklore, that's all anyone calls it. But I knew better. The accidents, the screams, the vanished drivers, they all centered here. I remembered the reports, drivers who stopped, even briefly, then vanished from memory. Some were never found. Others came back days later, disoriented, unable to recall the hours they'd spent here, like the road itself had swallowed them. I glanced in the rearview mirror. Fog, shadows, nothing else. I stepped out, flashlight in hand, feeling the chill bite through my jacket. The world felt different when you stop here. Smaller, warped, like the fog folds the distance between things, hides the edges, erases reference points. I tried to steady my breath, tried to remember why I was here. I told myself investigation, duty, careful study. But deep down, I knew curiosity had pulled me, like a hand tugging at the center of my chest. I followed the edge of the road, flashlight sweeping over damp asphalt and twisted trees. The sentinel leaned overhead, as it always had, black and silent, patient. I ran my fingers over the bark. Rough, aged, knotted, always the same. Watching, waiting, and I realized in that moment how long the legend had been alive in these hills. The locals talk about it quietly, never directly, like saying aloud might make it reach for you. Drivers who stop here at night vanish, or worse, they leave but never remember. I crouched by the asphalt, tracing faint tire marks with my gloved hand. They twisted, looped, curved in impossible angles. I remember the driver from the previous call, frantic, terrified, convinced he'd seen someone or something run across the road. The marks told a story, but only partially. They ended abruptly, then seemed to pick up again in the fog, as if the road itself had rewritten the path while no one was watching. A memory hit me, unbidden. Another driver, months ago, parked near the tree, swearing he had only stopped for a moment to check his map. He returned hours later, shaken, incoherent, unable to explain where he'd been or what had held him. I had chalked it up to confusion, stress, exhaustion. But now, standing here in the fog, I understood. The road doesn't let go. Not really. Not until it decides you're done. I felt the hair on my arms rise. A whisper of movement in the fog. A shadow that flicked at the edge of my vision. I blinked and it vanished. My pulse quickened. I wanted to call it a trick of the light. A tree branch caught in the wind. But I knew. I always knew when the road decided to speak. And this was one of those moments. I took a step closer to the center of the road, flashlight sweeping. The asphalt shimmered under the dew, like it was alive, or wet with something older. Tire marks twisted in loops, circles, crossing over themselves in ways that didn't make sense. I bent closer. My reflection in the wet surface looked back at me, but it wasn't quite right. Too pale, too hollow-eyed. A trick of the light, or something worse. I remembered another tale, one I had almost dismissed. A man parked his car just past mile marker 77, and when he returned to town, he couldn't recall ever leaving. Days later, he spoke of hours missing, of driving in loops he never intended, of hearing voices in the fog, calling his name. People laughed it off. Local legend. Road folklore. But standing here, I didn't laugh. I didn't breathe easily. I could feel it, the pull of the highway, wrapping around me, patient, cold, waiting. The fog thickened. My flashlight barely reached past 10 feet. I could see the edges of the tree lean, shadows dancing where none should exist. I heard it then, the faintest whisper. Not words, not quite, but tones, syllables almost human, curling in the fog. I froze, heart hammering, breath shallow. It wasn't my imagination. I wasn't imagining the tire marks twisting, the asphalt shifting under my feet, the shadows that moved just at the edge of sight. I backed up, hands trembling. The cruiser was close, warm and steady. I felt its solidity like an anchor. But the road was alive. I could feel it pulsing beneath me, subtle vibrations through the soles of my boots. The legend wasn't just a story. It wasn't just folklore. It was real, and it had rules. Anyone who stopped here, even for a moment, became part of its cycle. I swallowed hard, tried to step away, but it was harder than it should have been. My feet felt heavier, like the asphalt had grown sticky, like the fog itself resisted my movement. I looked down at the tire marks again. Loops, impossible angles, overlapping, a pattern, a map, and suddenly it clicked. I realized I wasn't just seeing random marks. I was seeing traces of everyone who had stopped here, all the drivers who'd vanished, all the ones who came back not remembering. They were etched into the road, and I was adding to it by standing here. I tried to convince myself to leave, to step back into the cruiser, to drive away and forget it ever happened. But the moment I turned toward the car, I felt it, the pull, a tug in my chest, subtle but insistent. The road didn't want me to leave. The legend didn't want me to leave. It had me, and I realized in that quiet, fog-filled stretch of night that leaving was a choice I might not get to make. I took another careful step, eyes scanning the tree line. The shadows shifted unnaturally. Shapes moved in the fog, fleeting glimpses of something almost human, almost alive. I felt their eyes on me. I could feel the faintest brush of breath, cold and damp, against my skin. I shivered, gripping the flashlight tighter. Mile marker 77 loomed behind me. A pale beacon, patient and immovable. I felt the weight of every vanished driver pressing in from all sides. The whispers grew louder, but still not words, just syllables, tones, a language older than memory. I wanted to turn and run. I wanted to abandon the cruiser and sprint back to town. But my legs felt wrong, heavy, uncooperative. The fog swallowed every step I tried to take. I remembered the sentinel tree, always there, always watching. Its branches stretched over the road like skeletal fingers, casting twisted shadows that seemed to move independently. I reached out, brushing a finger against the bark. Rough, knotted, alive in a way that didn't make sense. The shadows shifted again. I could feel it. The pull, the hunger, the patience of this stretch of highway. I backed toward the cruiser, finally, each step deliberate, careful, but the road resisted subtly in ways I could not explain. The fog thickened, obscuring the asphalt, the tire marks, the loops of drivers who had vanished. My reflection in the side mirror was pale, strained, hollow-eyed, and I realized in a cold, creeping way that stopping here, even for a moment, changed you, made you part of the pattern, part of the endless loop. I climbed into the cruiser, doors locking behind me, breath ragged, pulse racing. Headlights cut through the fog, revealing the empty road ahead. And I drove slowly, cautiously, glancing over my shoulder every few seconds. Mile marker 77 receded behind me, but the weight of it lingered, pressed into my mind. The loop, the pattern, the highway legend. It was all real, all alive, and I had touched it tonight. By the time I reached the next town, I felt hollow, hollowed out like the fog had seeped into my chest. I parked, sat in silence, trying to convince myself it was over, but I knew better. The endless loop wasn't something you escaped. You didn't leave. You carried it, a memory, a pull, a shadow in the fog. And the road was patient, always patient. I was halfway through my second cup of coffee when the call came in. The kind of call you barely notice at first. Another stray dog causing trouble in a town that seemed to have more lost animals than people. I rubbed my eyes and glanced at the clock. 2:17 p.m. slow, quiet afternoon. Perfect time for a routine check. I thought, that's what I told myself. Anyway, the voice on the radio was a little clipped, a little strained. Sheriff, we've got reports of a stray dog on Elm Street. Multiple minor accidents. Cars swerving. People nearly hitting each other. Residents are spooked. I sighed, grabbed my jacket, and muttered, figures. Elm Street wasn't exactly the kind of place that saw action. Not unless you counted teenagers sneaking beer behind the old gas station, or old man Harris yelling at kids to stay off his lawn. The drive over was quiet. Sun was low, spilling shadows across the cracked asphalt. I kept an eye out, scanning the road. Every tree looked like it might be hiding something, or someone. My mind had a way of filling in the blanks when nothing was there, but that didn't make the tension go away. I parked near the corner where the first reports had come in. Nobody in sight, just a faint smell of damp earth and exhaust. I stepped out, and the air felt heavier than usual, like it was holding its breath. And then I saw it, a dog, medium-sized, lean, coat dark enough to blend with the shadows under the street lamps. Its eyes, I don't know how to describe them. Sharp, almost too aware, like it wasn't just looking at me, but through me. I froze. My hand hovered over my holster, not because I thought the dog was dangerous, but because something about the way it stood there made my instincts flare. It didn't run. It didn't growl. It just watched, tilted its head ever so slightly. And in that tilt, I felt it studying me, calculating me. "Hey there, boy," I said cautiously, my voice breaking the silence. Nothing. I moved a step closer. Its eyes followed me, I could feel them, sharp, unblinking, unnervingly intelligent. My stomach nodded. I'd dealt with aggressive dogs before. This wasn't aggressive. It was deliberate. I radioed in, Unit 12, I've got eyes on the dog. It's just standing. No signs of aggression, but it's off. A pause. Off? The dispatcher asked, voice rising. I shrugged. I don't know. Watchful. Too aware, like it knows more than it should. I began walking along the curb, trying to keep my eyes on it, without showing fear. The dog mirrored me, staying just a few feet ahead. Every time I slowed, it slowed. Every time I sped up, it sped up. That's when the first accident happened. A blue sedan came barreling around the corner, tires squealing. I dove to the side as it swerved to avoid the dog. The car clipped the curb, and I caught the driver's panicked expression in time. The man barely looked at the dog. His eyes were fixed on me, as if I had control over what had just happened. The dog, for its part, didn't flinch. It just walked onto the sidewalk, tail low but steady, and stared at me like it had been waiting. I pulled my radio again. Dispatch, be advised. The dog is causing accidents, yes, but it's not scared. It's like it's... I stopped, realizing my words made no sense even as I said them. I don't know what it's doing. I need backup. No one responded right away. Typical. It was a small town. Backup was usually 20 minutes away at least. And here I was, alone, staring at a dog that didn't behave like any dog I'd ever seen. I tried calling it over. Come here, boy. Easy. Nothing. Not a twitch. Not a sound. Only those eyes. I remembered what old man Harris said once about dogs in this town. They're smarter than people think. He'd muttered while shoving a broom at some stray that had wandered into his yard. I never thought much of it. Dogs are smart. I get it. But this wasn't normal intelligence. This was watching, waiting, understanding. I moved cautiously toward it. The closer I got, the more the hairs on the back of my neck stood up. It wasn't afraid. And yet, it didn't attack. It simply walked ahead, staying just far enough to stay out of reach, just close enough to keep me in sight. Cars continued to swerve. Horns blared. I waved them off, but I could see the fear spreading. People started slowing down, unsure what to do. And the dog, it didn't run, didn't hide. It just existed in a way that felt deliberate, intentional. I tried to reason it out. Maybe it had a handler. Maybe someone trained it for some cruel joke. Maybe it was lost and terrified. Any logical explanation slipped through my fingers as soon as I looked into its eyes. There was no fear, no confusion, just observation. I backed toward my car, thinking I might coax it in with a leash if I had one. That's when I noticed the tracks. Not fresh paw prints in the dirt, those I expected, but the skid marks from the cars weren't random. They weren't accidents. They curved, stopped, shifted in ways that suggested planning. My pulse quickened. I couldn't shake it. Something about this dog was different. The wind picked up. The dog paused, ears twitching. Then it darted across the street, slipping between parked cars. I followed, trying to keep it in sight, but it disappeared into a narrow alley. I paused at the entrance, heart hammering, listening. Silence. I stepped in slowly, calling its name. The alley smelled of damp brick, and something else, something I couldn't place. And then I saw it, tail flicking, eyes glinting at the far end. No bark, no growl, just watching. I could feel it sizing me up, not like a pet sizing a stranger, not like a wild animal sizing prey. It was something in between, something almost human in its calculation. I swallowed hard. My hand went to my radio again. Dispatch. I need static. Dead air. Not unusual, but it felt heavy, oppressive, like the world had held its breath. The dog tilted its head again, slow and deliberate. I stepped closer. It didn't move, but I felt something shift. A subtle tension in the air, like it knew I was thinking, like it could read me. I blinked. When I opened my eyes, it was closer, not running, not charging, closer. And in that closeness, I felt the weight of its intelligence pressing down on me. I stumbled back, hard in my throat. "Easy," I whispered. "It's just a dog." But I knew I was lying. I backed out of the alley, keeping it in sight. It followed, effortless, precise. Every turn, every step measured. I could feel the dread creeping into my bones, slow and steady. By the time I got back to the main street, the sun had dropped further, shadows stretching across the pavement. I watched as the dog paused in the middle of the road, then slowly turned and vanished between two houses, like it had always been waiting, like it had never been lost at all. I stood there for a long moment, chest heaving, mind racing. I radioed in, voice tight, Unit 12 to dispatch. Dog gone. Area secure for now. No reply. Typical. I knew it wasn't gone. Not really. I could feel it somewhere in the alleys, in the shadows, watching, thinking, waiting. I climbed back into my car, hands trembling slightly as I gripped the wheel. I didn't know what I just encountered, but I knew one thing for certain. This wasn't a routine check. Not even close. And I had a sinking, gnawing feeling that whatever it was going to be back. I couldn't shake it. Even back at my office, the thought of those eyes haunted me. Sharp, too sharp, like they'd peer straight through to the part of me I didn't even want to admit existed. I kept replaying the scene over and over, the way it had moved, how it had waited. My stomach churned. The call should have been routine, simple, but something about that dog wasn't simple. I grabbed my coat again, knowing I'd be going back. Elm Street felt too small now, too ordinary. I needed to find it, to understand what the hell I was dealing with before someone got hurt, or worse. I started the patrol car, the engine rumbling low, and drove back toward the last place I'd seen it. Fog had rolled in while I was gone, settling over the streets like a wet blanket. Street lights glowed dimly through the gray, painting halos in the mist. It felt heavier than usual, like the fog wasn't just water and air. It was something that pressed against your skin, seeped into your bones. I could feel my pulse quicken. The town had a strange way of changing at night. But this was different. I parked near the alley where it had disappeared and stepped out. The air smelled damp, earthy, like rain had soaked into every crack and crevice. I could see my breath. Small clouds had drifted away too quickly. Silence wrapped around me. My boots crunched against the gravel as I moved carefully toward the alley. The tracks were easy enough to follow. Paw prints in the wet soil, neat and deliberate, almost too measured, like the dog knew exactly where it wanted to go. I stepped into the alley, scanning every shadow. My radio stayed silent, leaving only the sound of my own footsteps echoing back at me. The trail led out onto the old service road, the one that cut to the northern edge of town and disappeared into the forest. I hesitated at the tree line. The fog thickened here, swallowing light and sound. Branches twisted overhead like arthritic fingers, and the damp earth smelled stronger, heavier. I swallowed hard. My gut told me I should turn back, that this was stupid. But I couldn't. Not now. I followed the prints into the trees. Every step felt slower, heavier, like the forest was breathing with me, shifting under my weight. The deeper I went, the more the world seemed to stretch, edges of the trees bending and blending into the mist. My watch said only 15 minutes had passed, but it felt like hours. Sunlight, if there had been any, was gone. Only gray, fog, and shadow. I called out softly, voice barely more than a whisper. "Hey, boy, come on, let's easy." My words felt useless here. The fog swallowed sound, turning my own voice into some distant, strange echo. Then I heard it, a faint crunch behind me. Not fast, not chasing. Just a careful, deliberate step. I froze, and there it was, the dog, standing just beyond the fog, eyes catching what little light filtered through, like it had been waiting for me to catch up. I swallowed hard, trying to steady my shaking hands. "Easy," I whispered again, voice tight. It didn't move, didn't bark, just waited. Its gaze was too precise, like it had been anticipating my every thought. I took a tentative step forward. So, did it, always staying just out of reach, yet never far enough to escape notice. We moved deeper into forest together. Every few steps, the world seemed to bend, the fog thickening, shadows stretching. I glanced down at the tracks in the mud, but sometimes they weren't there, as if the forest had swallowed them whole. Time felt distorted. A second could stretch into a minute into something I couldn't measure. My mind started to play tricks. I could swear the trees shifted when I blinked. One moment, a clear path. The next, something darker, tighter, pressing closer. I stopped to catch my breath. My chest burned, muscles aching from tension. That's when I noticed the scent. Not just wet earth or decaying leaves, but something else coppery, metallic. It made my stomach twist. My head spun. I tried to dismiss it. Maybe an animal, maybe the forest itself. But it lingered in my nose, clinging almost alive. The dog waited patiently, eyes fixed on me. It didn't move forward until I did, and even then, it moved with a calculated grace. I followed, stepping over roots and through underbrush, ears straining for any sound beyond the crunch of my boots. The forest seemed endless, or maybe it was a fog, or maybe it wasn't the forest at all, but something else playing tricks on my mind. Time had a strange quality here. My watch had stopped, battery dead, though I could swear I checked it earlier. My phone gave nothing but static, the screen flickering in and out, and still, the dog moved ahead, leading me deeper, as if it knew exactly where I needed to go. I stopped at a narrow clearing. Fog clung to the ground like smoke, curling around tree trunks. The dog paused, sitting calmly in the middle, eyes unblinking. I realized I couldn't see the edges of the clearing. Shadows bled into one another, and the fog thickened until it was nearly impossible to tell up from down. My stomach knotted. I wanted to turn back. I wanted to run, but I couldn't. I couldn't leave it here. I took a step forward, and the world seemed to shift. 1 second, the clearing was empty. The next, shadows seemed to twist along the edges, elongating and contracting. My mind screamed at me, but my feet kept moving. I called out again. "Easy, it's just us, come on." The dog didn't respond. It simply watched. And then it stood, tail low, and walked slowly toward the far end of the clearing. I followed, feeling the pull of something I couldn't name. Fear, curiosity, both. Time became meaningless. Every step forward felt like walking through molasses, yet every step brought me closer to something inevitable, though I had no idea what. I felt unsteady, disoriented. My senses seemed heightened, stretched to their limits. I could hear the faint rustle of leaves, the subtle drip of water from unseen branches, my own heartbeat thundering in my ears. Then I noticed it, marks in the mud. Not paw prints this time, but footprints. Human, but too long, too narrow, with toes that seemed elongated. I froze. My mind recoiled. Maybe it was a trick of the fog, a shadow, something I wanted to be nothing. I looked at the dog, its head tilted, slow, deliberate, and those eyes seemed to say, "Do you see it now?" I swallowed, voice barely audible. What are you?" The dog didn't answer. Of course it couldn't, but I could feel something pass between us. Understanding, intention, a silent communication that sent a shiver down my spine. I continued forward, drawn by the path, by the fog, by the sense that stopping now would be worse than moving. The forest seemed alive. Branches reached down like hands, roots twisted underfoot, fog curling around me as if aware of my presence. And always just ahead, the dog, patient, watching, leading. Minutes passed, or hours. I had no way of knowing. My mind was fraying at the edges, thoughts twisting, memories mixing with reality. I could swear I heard whispers, faint, incoherent, like the forest itself was speaking, murmuring things I couldn't understand. But the dog didn't react. It walked ahead, calm, deliberate, unbothered. At some point, the trees thinned slightly. I could see a faint glow through the fog, pale and diffuse. I had no idea if it was moonlight or something else. My heart leapt, thinking maybe I'd finally found the edge of this strange stretch, the end of the fog, the return to the normal world. But the dog paused, tail low, eyes fixed on the glow. And in that pause, I realized something. This wasn't just a dog leading me through the forest. This was a test, or a trap, or something I couldn't name. something that existed beyond logic, beyond reason. I felt it pressing against my mind, a silent insistence that I keep moving. I shook my head, trying to clear it. "It's just a dog," I whispered. "Just a dog." But I didn't believe it. Not anymore. Not when the fog pressed in from all sides, when time stretched and warped, when the forest seemed alive and breathing. And not when the dog, calm and deliberate, waited for me, patient, unyielding, like it had all the time in the world. I took another step forward, and the world held its breath. I should have turned back when the fog started to thicken, when the trees began leaning over me like they were listening. I didn't. I followed the dog deeper into the forest, drawn by something I couldn't name. I told myself it was duty, curiosity, a need to find answers before someone else got hurt. But deep down, I knew it wasn't rational. Not anymore. The dog had vanished without warning. 1 second it was there, just ahead of me, calm, deliberate, moving like it had all the time in the world. The next, nothing. No sound of paws in the mud, no movement in the fog, nothing but silence, so thick it felt like it was pressing against my ears. I stopped, trying to tell myself it had slipped off the path, wandered somewhere, maybe scared by the strange fog. But I knew better. I swallowed hard. Easy. I whispered, more to myself than anyone. My voice felt alien in this emptiness. I could barely hear it over the pounding of my own heartbeat. I stepped forward, boots sinking slightly into the soft, wet earth. The fog was a living thing now, curling around trees, brushing against my coat, making the world feel smaller, tighter, like the forest had folded in on itself. I squinted into the gray, searching for movement, searching for some sign that I wasn't completely alone. That's when I felt it. A subtle shift in the shadows. A presence, not close enough to see clearly, but close enough to make my skin crawl. My gut tightened. Every instinct screamed at me to leave, to turn around and run. But my feet moved anyway, slower, careful, heavy with tension. I started noticing other things. Small noises at first. Twigs snapping, leaves rustling. But they didn't sound like the dog. They were uneven, deliberate. Too many all around me. And then the feeling hit me. I was being watched. Not by the fog, not by the trees themselves, but by something inside them. Something unseen. I froze. My pulse hammered in my ears. I tried to focus on breathing. Try to remember logic. It's just the forest, I told myself. Animals, shadows, nothing more. But I didn't believe it. Every hair on my arm stood on end. My eyes darted between tree trunks, searching, desperate. But the fog played tricks on me, stretching and bending the world into shapes that weren't there, or maybe were. I took a cautious step forward. Something moved. Not a shadow, not a branch. Something small, quick, just at the edge of my vision. My heart leapt. I turned fully toward it, and the fog swallowed it. Nothing. No trace. No sound. No paw prints. I felt my hands trembling, gripping my flashlight, though I knew the beam would barely pierce the mist. I walked slowly, every step deliberate. Every sound now felt amplified. The crunch of leaves, the snap of a twig, the faint whisper of wind. And then I heard it, a rustle above me, like something shifting from branch to branch. My eyes scanned the trees, straining to the fog, but all I saw were the silhouettes of trunks stretching into gray. I could feel eyes on me. Not human eyes, not like the dog's, but countless faint, like tiny points of awareness scattered in the darkness. I swallowed hard. I didn't understand. Fear gnawed at my gut, slow and insistent. My mind tried to argue. It's just squirrels, birds, rats. But the feeling was undeniable. I was being observed, watched, measured, judged. I started to move again, quicker this time, try and put some distance between me and the unseen watchers. But the forest seemed to tighten around me. Branches snagged at my jacket. Roots twisted beneath my boots. The fog clung to me, thickening as if I were moving deeper into some other world. Every step made my pulse race faster. Every snap of a twig sounded like a warning. I thought about calling in on the radio, telling someone what was happening, but the static was relentless. My phone had long since died. No signal. No help. Nothing but me, the fog, and the forest. My breath came fast, shallow, and I forced myself to slow it, one step at a time. Keep moving. Keep your mind. Don't panic. And then I saw them. Eyes. Hundreds of them. Faintly glinting to the fog, scattered among the trees. Small, distant, watching. They didn't blink. They didn't move like animals normally do. Just waited. Focused. Observing me. I stumbled back, breath catching in my throat. My hands went to my face, to shield myself from what I couldn't fully see. The rational part of my mind screamed, "It's a trick of the fog, it's reflections, it's nothing." But it didn't matter. My gut knew. Something was in the trees, something I couldn't comprehend, something that had been waiting for me the entire time. I tried call out, "Hey!" My voice sounded thin, small, swallowed by the fog. Nothing answered. No movement, no sound. Nothing but the faint glimmer of countless eyes, watching, unblinking, patient. I started walking backward, trying to retrace my steps, trying to find some sense of direction. But the forest had changed. The path was gone, swallowed by mist. The trees seemed closer, denser, pressing in. My mind spun. Minutes or hours. Time didn't exist here. My hand shook as I fumbled my flashlight, the beam barely cutting through the fog. And still, the eyes followed, countless, silent, unyielding. I remembered the dog, the way it had disappeared. I had thought it was leading me, guiding me, but now I wasn't sure. Maybe it had led me here, to this place where the forest wasn't just trees, where the fog wasn't just moisture, where the watchers weren't just shadows. Maybe it had been waiting, patient, calculating. Maybe it had known exactly what I'd see. A low, wet sound echoed somewhere to my left. Not a growl, not a bark, just a soft, deliberate noise. My pulse jumped. I turned slowly, trying to see through the mist. Something shifted. One pair of eyes, larger than the others, blinked, or maybe it didn't, and then disappeared again. My stomach dropped. I couldn't tell if it had moved or if my mind had imagined it. I felt a tight knot of fear curling in my chest, a slow, crawling dread that had nothing to do with logic. I started moving forward, uncertain, guided by instinct more than reason. Every step was careful, deliberate, eyes scanning. I felt exposed, vulnerable, like the forest itself was alive, breathing, aware. Shadows stretched, shifted, twisted into shapes that weren't there, or maybe were. My mind fought to cling to reality, to tell myself it was just a forest, just fog, just nerves. But I couldn't, not anymore. I stumbled over a root and cursed, heart hammering. The mist swirled around me, and I realized I had no idea which way I had come. I was lost, completely, terrifyingly lost. The eyes remained, faint and numerous, scattered in the trees, watching, waiting, silent. I couldn't look away, and I couldn't look directly at them. My vision kept flicking to shadows, trying to track them, but they seemed to shift, avoiding focus, teasing my mind. I felt the weight of it then. The forest wasn't empty. I wasn't alone. And whatever else was here, it wasn't just observing. It was aware, present, conscious. I could feel it pressing against the edges of my mind, subtle, insistent, like it wanted me to notice, to understand, to feel small, insignificant, exposed. I stumbled again, this time catching myself on a tree trunk. My hands were shaking, sweat mixing with the fog that clung to my face. I whispered to myself, trying to hold on to some thread of reason. It's okay, it's just a forest. It's just shadows, just fog. But the eyes didn't vanish. They remained, scattered among the trees, unblinking, patient, intelligent. I could feel them judging me, reading me, understanding more than I wanted to admit. The dog had vanished, yes, but its presence lingered, a memory, a guide, a warning. And the watchers, they were here now, filling the space, pressing in. I forced myself to take a deep breath, step by step. Keep moving. Don't let panic take over. My hands shook as I gripped the flashlight, the beam slicing feebly through the mist. Shadows stretched and twisted at the edges, shapes forming and dissolving, always just beyond comprehension. I realized then that I couldn't trust my senses. Not my eyes, not my ears, not my mind. Everything seemed altered, stretched, distorted. Time had no meaning. Space had no meaning. The forest, the fog, the watchers. They were all part of something larger. Something I couldn't name, couldn't understand, couldn't control. And still I moved, step by step, breath by breath, trying to hold on to the thin thread of reality I had left. The eyes remained silent, unblinking, numerous. I could feel them in my mind now, pressing, insistent, almost communicative. I swallowed hard and whispered again, voice barely audible, shaking. I don't know what you want. I don't know why you're here. Silence answered me. Only the fog, the trees, the watching, and the slow, creeping realization that I wasn't in Elm Street anymore. Not really. Not entirely. That somewhere, somehow, I had crossed a threshold, guided by the dog, led by something beyond reason. And I didn't know if I could ever go back. And I didn't know if I wanted to. It was quiet. Quieter than it had any right to be at this hour. The kind of quiet that presses against your ears and makes you listen for things that aren't there. I leaned back in my chair at the station, the fluorescent light humming overhead, a low, constant thrum that felt almost alive. My coffee had gone cold hours ago, but I didn't bother pouring another cup. The world outside was black, and the streets of this town, normally the kind that sleep with one eye open, were bare. Nothing moved except the shadows cast by the flickering light in the station hallway. I clicked the radio on. Static hissed in my ears, a familiar companion that made the silence almost tolerable. "Dispatch, this is Unit 3. I said, my voice echoing faintly off the walls. My own words sounded strange in the emptiness. The dispatcher's voice came back, calm, routine. "Unit 3, copy. All quiet on your end." I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. "All quiet," I said. Quiet, but not empty. There was something in the air tonight that made the usual background hum of radio chatter feel sharper, like I was straining to hear something that didn't belong. It started as a faint murmur, buried under the usual traffic. Someone was talking, or trying to, but the words were jumbled, sliced into fragments by static. I frowned, turning the volume up just a little. Come Shadow's door. It vanished before I could make sense of it. I frowned again. Usually, I could trace a voice, call it back if I needed to. But this slipped in and out of frequencies like smoke through my fingers. I checked the other channels. Patrols, fire, EMS, all normal, all mundane. I was about to shrug it off as interference when it happened again, sharper this time. The words were still scrambled, but they carried a tone, a pleading almost like someone shouting from the other side of a locked door. "Help, don't see?" I froze. My hand hovered over the mic, unwilling to press it. There was a logic to these voices, a pattern buried somewhere, but I couldn't piece it together. It wasn't coming from another officer, or at least not one I recognized. It was different, alien, yet familiar in a way that gnawed at the edges of my mind. I leaned back, rubbed my eyes. Maybe I was imagining it. Maybe I'd been staring at the screen too long, letting the quiet seep into my skull. But then the voice came again, clearer this time, cutting through the static like a knife. "Don't look behind me." I froze completely. The hairs on the back of my neck stood on end. I looked around the station, half expecting someone or something to be watching me from the shadows, but the room was empty. Still, my stomach clenched, and my heart started to thump a little faster than it should have. I flicked the mic switch, hesitated. "Dispatch, do you hear that?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. There was a pause. Then the dispatcher replied, calm as ever. "Hear what, Unit 3? Everything sounds fine here." I frowned. "No, there's a voice. On the channel, it's scrambled." She paused again, this time with a hint of confusion. "I don't hear anything unusual, Unit 3. Maybe some interference. Try switching to Channel 5. See if that clears it up." I toggled the dial. Channel 5 was static at first, just the usual hiss. But then it began again, words half-formed, fractured like someone speaking underwater. "Under floor, can't find." My stomach dropped. I pressed the mic again. This is Unit 3. Who is this? Identify yourself. The static answered me. Nothing else. No voice, no acknowledgement. Just the endless, crackling hiss. I sat back, exhaling slowly, trying to calm my racing thoughts. Maybe it was some prank. Maybe it was some kid messing with the frequencies. I told myself that over and over. Maybe I was imagining it, but the sound, the tone of it wouldn't let me. It was too deliberate, too precise in its chaos. I rubbed my temples and decided to step outside, hoping the cool night air would clear my head. The station doors creaked when I pushed them open, the streetlights casting long, thin shadows across the parking lot. The night was heavy, thick like it had weight. I took a deep breath and let it fill my lungs. And then I heard it again, carried faintly through the radio clip to my belt, still on Channel 5. Can't wait, door don't. I froze. My hand went to the mic again. Every instinct screamed at me not to respond, but curiosity, or maybe something darker. One, this is Unit 3. Speak clearly. Who is this? Static. And then, for just a moment, the faintest whisper. Almost a breath. Almost a voice. Watch. The word barely left the speaker before it was gone, swallowed up by silence. I felt a chill creep down my spine. My eyes scanned the empty street. Nothing. Not a single car. Not a single shadow beyond the lamplight. My chest tightened. I felt like I was holding my breath, waiting for something that wasn't coming. But I knew it would. Somehow I just knew. I forced myself back inside, shaking. My hands were clammy as I shut the door, the sound louder than it should have been in the quiet. I sat back at my desk, staring at the radio. Channel 5 seemed normal now, calm, almost too calm, like it had never spoken at all. I leaned forward, rested my forehead against the cool edge of the desk, and tried to push the voices out of my mind. But they lingered, curling around the edges of my thoughts like smoke. I could still hear them faintly when I closed my eyes, pleading, warning, mocking. I couldn't tell which. The clock ticked slowly. Minutes stretched into hours. And all the while, the radio hummed its low, constant hum, like it knew I was listening. I tried to distract myself. Check the files on the desk. Routine reports, minor traffic incidents. Nothing unusual. Everything was mundane. The town itself was mundane. And yet, the voices wouldn't leave. Every time I switched channels, every time I tried to focus on the glowing numbers of the clock, there they were, lurking at the edge of hearing, waiting, fractured, impossible. Then, just when I thought I might be losing my mind, the static returned on Channel 5. This time, it wasn't whispers. It was words. Clearer, imperfect, broken, but coherent enough to send a shock straight through me. You shouldn't be here. I dropped the radio. It clattered against the desk and slid to the floor. My heart thumped so loud, I thought it might burst. My hand shook as I picked it up again, afraid and compelled at the same time. Who is this? I demanded, my voice low, trembling. No answer, just a static, thick and heavy, like something pressing against the walls of the room. I could almost see it, dark and dense, moving in the corners where the light didn't reach. My mind raced. Call it interference. Call it a trick of my imagination. Call it what you want. But something was here. Something listening. Something aware. I sat back, gripping the radio like a lifeline, and tried to steady my breathing. I thought of my father, who had been a sheriff before me. He would have laughed at my nerves, called them childish. But he never worked nights like this. He never listened to radios that whispered in the dark, that carried voices that weren't supposed to exist. I shook my head. I needed to focus. I needed to document. I grabbed a notebook from the desk and started writing down everything. The times, the fragments of voices, the tones. Each scribbled line felt heavier than the last, as though the words themselves were a warning I couldn't fully understand. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Time had become slippery. The voices came and went, sometimes faint, sometimes sharp, always fragmented, always calling. I stopped trying to respond. I stopped trying to make sense of them. I just listened, and in listening, I began to feel it. Not fear exactly, but an awareness, like I was being measured, evaluated, like the night itself was learning something about me. By the time dawn started to bleed through the blinds, the voices had stopped. Channel 5 was quiet, the static replaced by the gentle hum of morning traffic far beyond the town's edge. I exhaled a long, shaky breath and leaned back in my chair. My hands were sore from gripping the radio. My head ached from straining to hear what shouldn't exist. And yet, I knew it wasn't over. The fragments, the whispers, the impossible voices, they would come back. Tonight or the night after, or some night I thought was safe. And next time, they might not be content to remain on the other side of the radio. I shut off the mic, the room suddenly deafening without the hum of the radio. I poured myself another cup of coffee, black and bitter, and tried to convince myself it had all been interference. But as I stared out the window, at the quiet streets now bathed in pale morning light, I felt it. The lingering touch of something waiting, watching, always waiting. And I realized that quiet wasn't just absence of sound. Sometimes, quiet was a presence, a thing with patience. And tonight it had spoken. The night had settled over the town like a weight, heavy and quiet, pressing against the windows of the station. The earlier voices, the ones on Channel 5, hadn't returned, and that should have brought some relief, but it didn't. It only made the silence thicker, more suffocating, like the kind of quiet that waits before something falls apart. I kept my eyes on the radio, hands wrapped around the receiver, half expecting it to crackle to life again. I was wrong. It did. The first call came not as a voice I could recognize, not as the fractured whispers from before, but as something slower, deliberate, almost casual. Unit 3 intersection of Maple and 5th Red sedan. Collision in 2 minutes. I froze. My stomach dropped, my mind scrambling to dismiss it as some bizarre coincidence. But I knew those streets. I knew that intersection. It was empty, silent. And yet, the voice had said it would happen in 2 minutes. 2 minutes later, the radio erupted with static screams and sirens, a patrol caller shouting over the chaos. A red sedan had skidded across the wet asphalt, slammed into the lamppost just as described. My hand shook as I grabbed my coat and keys, the words of the ghostly call still ringing in my ears. I reached my cruiser, engine already running, and I couldn't stop thinking. I had just listened to the future. Driving there, the town felt different. The shadows were longer, more purposeful, as if they had been waiting. The mist curled along the ground, sticking to the tires, clinging to the edges of the streetlights. I pulled up to the scene, heart still hammering. Officers were already there, guiding the driver from the wreckage, shaken but alive. I parked, stepped out, and looked back at the lamppost leaning at an impossible angle. It all matched the call perfectly. I climbed back into the car, shaking my head. It couldn't be real. It wasn't real. Calls like that didn't happen. People didn't speak the future. And yet, the radio, the static, the words, I hadn't imagined them. The rest of the night became a blur of similar incidents. Unit 3 North Side, house fire. 3rd window, female resident trapped. By the time I reached the address, a small 2-story house on the outskirts of town. The fire trucks were already there. Flames licked the siding, smoke curling into the sky. I watched as firefighters broke through the 3rd floor window, hauling a terrified woman to safety. It was exactly what the call had said. My hands were trembling as I gripped the steering wheel on the way back to the station. I replayed the words over and over, trying to convince myself it was luck, coincidence, maybe some kind of sick prank. But the timing, the specificity, it was impossible. And then the voice started to change. It no longer spoke in clipped, warning fragments. It began to tell me things I couldn't see yet, things that had not happened. Unit 3, small diner, back alley, person, fall, knife. I pressed the radio to my ear, stomach twisting. I didn't want to go. Part of me screamed to stay put, to ignore the call. But another part, the part trained to respond, trained to act, trained to keep people alive, forced me out into the night again. The diner sat at the edge of town, neon buzzing faintly. I parked a block away and watched. Nothing happened at first. My pulse was loud in my ears. Every shadow seemed to twitch, every rustle of leaves like a warning. Then, from the alley behind the diner, a figure stumbled. A fight, a struggle, a knife, and then the person fell, hitting the ground hard, exactly as the call had said. I ran, radio clutched in my chest, calling for backup as the seconds crawled like hours. By the time I reached the alley, the street was empty. The fallen figure scrambled to its feet, unharmed but shaken, as though the fall had been real, but somehow less severe than it had appeared. I couldn't breathe. The night was closing in, thick with something unseen, a sense that the world had bent itself to the voice on the radio. I didn't sleep that night. I sat at the station desk, staring at the receiver, every nerve on edge, every crackle of static made me flinch. And I realized with a sinking feeling that the voice wasn't just predicting events. It was guiding them, or perhaps testing me. The next call came slowly, deliberately, like a warning drawn out in smoke. Unit 3, East Side, woman, on bridge, fall 3 minutes. I didn't move immediately. I stared at the clock. 3 minutes. That was all I had. My mind raced as I ran to the cruiser. The bridge was over the river, the water dark and silent beneath. I arrived just as the seconds were bleeding out. She was there, leaning too far over the edge, hair blowing in the wind. I yelled, but she didn't turn. My hands trembled on the railing as I reached for her, heart hammering in my chest. Then I remembered the voice, and somehow that tiny memory gave me the courage to act. I grabbed her just before she slipped. She gasped, eyes wide, wet with tears and fear. I pulled her back to safety, my arms shaking. The wind felt colder after that, sharper, as though the night had noticed what I had done and was adjusting itself around me. Back in the car, hands still trembling on the wheel, I realized a pattern. Each call wasn't random. Each call was precise. Each call required me to act. The voice wasn't simply predicting. It was forcing me to choose, to intervene, to cross lines I hadn't crossed before. I thought of my father again, the old sheriff who used to tell me that the job was about protecting people, about controlling the chaos. But this was different. This wasn't just about saving people. This was about answering to something that was neither human nor predictable. Hours passed. The calls came faster, sharper, more urgent. Unit 3 intersection, car. Out of control, children, watch. I obeyed each one instinctively, even though my mind screamed in protest. And each time, it was as if the night itself was watching, learning how far I would go, how far I would bend. My hands bled from gripping the wheel too tightly. My eyes stung from the strain of looking for shadows in every corner, every alley, every street. And through it all, the voice never hesitated, never faltered, always there, always guiding, always whispering. By the time dawn began to seep over the rooftops, pale and trembling, I was exhausted, hollowed out. The calls had stopped, leaving only the constant hum of the radio, now silent but heavy, like a thing that had been feeding on the night. I leaned back, hands resting on the desk, and let the weariness wash over me. I tried to convince myself it was over. The calls would not return. The night would return to its usual quiet, ordinary state. But I knew better. I could feel in the bones of the station, in the lingering chill of the air, in the way my pulse still thudded in my ears. And somewhere deep in my chest, I knew the voice would come again. Not just tonight, not just tomorrow, but whenever it chose. And the next time, it might not leave me the choice to act, to save, to intervene. I sat there, staring at the radio, listening to the silence, and I realized something I didn't want to admit even to myself. The voice didn't need to speak to the dead. It spoke to me, to my instincts, to the part of me that had taken an oath to protect, to act, to respond. And by doing so, it bound me to it, thread by thread, call by call, until I was no longer just a witness. I was a participant. I was a part of whatever this was. I poured a cup of coffee, bitter and black, and tried to make sense of it, tried to calm my shaking hands, my racing mind. But the truth lingered, cold and unrelenting. The voice was not a friend. It was not neutral. It was something that watched, measured, waited, and most terrifyingly, learned. I stared out the window at the waking town. Streets beginning to hum with the first cars of morning. Everything looked normal. Too normal. Like the night hadn't even existed. But I knew better. The calls had been real. The falls, the collisions, the fires. They had all happened. And they would happen again. And when they did, I would be listening. The highway was empty. It had to be. There was nothing out there except a thin line of asphalt stretching into darkness. The occasional reflector blinking back at me like eyes in the night. I gripped the steering wheel tighter than I should have, knuckles white, and tried to tell myself it was just a quiet night, the kind I used to crave before the calls began. But quiet nights didn't make the radio talk. It started as a whisper at first, faint, static-laced. I thought maybe I had left Channel 5 on again. I tried to turn it off. The dial clicked, but the whisper persisted, louder, clearer. Unit 3, your hands are shaking. You know you can't stop it. I froze. My stomach dropped, and the hair on my arms prickled. That wasn't prediction this time. That was observation. Someone or something was listening to me, not just my actions, but my thoughts, my fears. I swallowed hard. Who's there? I muttered, almost to myself, almost hoping the question would vanish into the black night. The radio crackled, then answered, not in fragments, not in warnings this time, but as if it had been waiting for me to ask. I am listening, always. I slammed my hand down on the dashboard, startled by the clarity, the calm certainty of the voice. It didn't scream. It didn't shout. It didn't threaten. It simply stated, and I felt my chest tighten in ways I hadn't felt before. I forced my mind to think logically, rationally. Equipment malfunction, interference, my imagination, something simple, anything simple, but my thoughts churned like storm clouds. The voice knew. It had known my hands were shaking before I even realized it myself. You are tired, you are alone, you will look away. I swallowed again, throat dry, heart hammering like a drum. I gripped the wheel tighter and tried to focus on the road. Headlights stretched out ahead like a river of liquid silver, but the words wouldn't leave. You will glance left and fear what you see. I didn't want to look, but instinct forced my eyes to the side mirror. The reflection showed nothing at first, just a black emptiness behind me. The curve of the highway, the faint glow of distant signs. Then something flickered in the corner of my eye, something moving just beyond recognition. A shadow that wasn't mine. I blinked. It was gone. My chest heaved. My hand shook harder, gripping the wheel as if letting go would mean letting it in. You blink, you flinch, you fear what waits. I slammed my hand over the radio, trying to stop the voice, trying to stop the knowledge. It seeped through the cracks anyway, through the static, through the circuits, through the thin membrane separating the world of the living from whatever this was. The highway stretched endlessly, dark and cold, and the voice didn't pause. It began to speak of my past, my failures, my choices. Names I hadn't spoken in years. People I had failed to protect. Remember the child on Elm Street? You could not save her and you watched. My chest tightened. I had tried to forget that night. I had buried it, pushed it into some locked drawer of my mind. But the voice pulled it out, wrapped it in darkness, made me see it again in perfect clarity. The screaming, the sirens, the helplessness. Tears burned my eyes, but I didn't dare blink long enough to let them fall. The highway seemed to close in, asphalt and shadows pressing from all sides. My mind raced. How could it know? How could it know the things I kept hidden from myself? You regret, you will regret again, you are not safe. The words wrapped around my throat. I pressed my forehead to the steering wheel, inhaling sharply. My eyes flicked to the rearview mirror again, and I thought I saw a movement, a figure or several, skimming along the edges of the road, too fast to be human, too precise to be coincidence. I gritted my teeth and forced myself to focus on the headlights ahead, the lines of the road, the faint glow of signs in the distance. Logic told me I was hallucinating, that sleep deprivation and fear were breaking my mind. But the voice didn't lie. It knew everything. It knew me better than I knew myself. You will hesitate and you will fail. I slammed the brakes. My tires screamed against the asphalt. I forced myself to breathe, counting each exhale in a steady rhythm, willing my pulse to slow, willing my hands to stop shaking. But the voice didn't stop. It became sharper, more insistent, predicting my very next movements. Your eyes will wander to the guardrail, the shadow there. I looked. The guardrail was empty, but the shadow stretched impossible, moving against the grain of light, against the curve of the land. I felt my stomach drop, felt the sudden sick taste of fear crawling into my throat. I had no control over what I saw, over what it made me see. You will breathe shallow, your chest tight. The shadow follows. I tried to switch channels. Nothing. I turned the radio off completely. Silence. Absolute silence. And then just a faint echo through the static, almost soft, almost intimate. Do not turn away, you cannot escape. I felt my body betray me. My hands gripped the wheel, but I wasn't steering. My eyes flitted across the dark horizon, searching for shapes that didn't exist, shadows that didn't belong. Every curve, every dip in the asphalt became a threat. Every faint light became a promise of something hidden. I thought about calling dispatch, trying to report what was happening. But what could I say? That the radio was speaking to me, predicting my actions, speaking of shadows and memories and fears I hadn't told a soul? It sounded insane. I sounded insane. And yet, every word of the voice rang true, cutting through the pretense of reason. You will pull over, and you will remember the bridge, the fall, your own failure. I slammed my foot on the brakes again, heart hammering, and pulled over to the shoulder. Mist curled around the asphalt like smoke, curling over my tires, through my shoes, into the edges of my mind. The car was quiet now, the night still, except for the faint, lingering hum of the radio, even though it was switched off. I sat there, shaking, listening to my own ragged breaths, trying to convince myself it was over. But the voice had not left. It was inside me, in my head, speaking directly to my mind. Every fear I had ever buried, every hesitation, every lapse in courage, it knew them all, and it whispered them to me. You fear the dark. You fear being alone. You fear forgetting, and yet you cannot leave. I ran my hands over my face, tried to rub the terror away, tried to make sense of it, but there was no sense. Only the understanding that whatever this was, it was patient, it was eternal, and it had chosen me. I thought about my father, about the nights he spent alone in the station, about the quiet pride he carried with him, about the silence he valued. He would have laughed, or maybe scolded me for letting fear take hold, but he didn't know this. No one knew this, and yet it had always been there, watching, waiting, learning. You will drive again, and you will follow, and you will see what must be seen. The words were not a suggestion. They were not a prediction anymore. They were a command. And as much as I wanted to resist, I knew I would obey, because every instinct in me screamed that to disobey would be worse than fear, worse than death. I started the engine again, hands trembling, eyes wide. The road ahead stretched endlessly, black and silent, lined with shadows that seemed to lean in closer as I drove. And the radio whispered, not in fragments, not in warnings, but in intimate knowledge. Every hesitation, every doubt, every secret fear. It named them all. You will see, you will remember. You are not safe, and yet you will continue. I drove on, headlights cutting through the darkness, pulse hammering, knowing that I had crossed some line. The highway was no longer just asphalt and signs. It was a river of echoes, of predictions, of voices that spoke directly to me, that knew me better than I knew myself. And somewhere deep in the hum of the tires, the rush of the wind, the faint static lingering in the background, I realized the truth. The voice did not belong to the radio. It belonged to the highway, to the night, to the spaces between what was and what would be, and it had found me. I did not know if I would survive the night. I did not know if I would survive myself, but I was listening, and listening meant obeying. Listening meant following. Listening meant that the darkness, the voice, the inevitable had claimed me, and I knew with a certainty that chilled me to bone, that it would not stop. Not tonight, not tomorrow, not ever. The night pressed down harder than it ever had before, heavier than the black asphalt stretching beneath my tires. I gripped the wheel so tight it burned my palms, staring down the long, empty road ahead. Every instinct in me screamed to turn around, to ignore the voice that had spoken over the radio, guided me towards something I couldn't yet understand. But I couldn't. I couldn't stop. The radio crackled again, low and insistent, and I felt it more than I heard it. It wasn't just sound. It was intention, pressing into my mind, naming my hesitation, and twisting it into a command. Unit 3, follow. Do not hesitate. The road bends. You will not turn back. I swallowed, tasting copper and fear. My hands shook, but I pressed down on the accelerator anyway, heart hammering in time with the static hum of the radio. I knew the words weren't just instructions. They were promises and threats all at once, a force that reached through frequencies, pulling me towards some invisible line I hadn't wanted to cross. The familiar landmarks of the town began to stretch and warp. Trees seemed taller, their shadows longer, crawling across the road in ways that didn't make sense. The streetlights flickered, too bright, then too dim, as if blinking in warning. I tried to tell myself it was my imagination, sleep deprivation, the creeping exhaustion that had been building since the first calls began. But this wasn't imagination. The air itself had changed. It was thicker, almost wet, carrying a faint smell of iron and something older than anything I had ever known. The left turn, wait, the bridge, you remember? I jerked the wheel instinctively, as if the words themselves were a physical shove. The bridge appeared ahead, sudden and impossible, like it had materialized out of the mist. I hadn't known it was there. I hadn't driven this road in years. And yet, there it was, its outline sharp against the dark river below, the water moving too slowly, too silently, to be natural. I thought about stopping. I wanted to stop. My mind screamed that I should pull over, call dispatch, do anything to regain the rules of the world. But the radio wouldn't let me. It pressed closer, whispering through the static, into the cracks in my thoughts, naming my fears with precision that made my skin crawl. You will not hesitate. The line is drawn. Step over. I exhaled, hands trembling on the wheel. The bridge was empty. Too quiet. Too precise. I felt like I was suspended in some waiting space, the night holding its breath along with me. My reflection in the rearview mirror flickered, and for a moment, I thought I saw a face that wasn't mine, pale and featureless, pressing just beyond the glass. I blinked. It was gone, but the sensation lingered, coiling around my spine like a living thing. The world began to warp. Street signs shifted as I drove past, letters stretching and twisting, almost readable, almost alive. The guardrails bent subtly, their metal looking as if it had been heated and pulled, defying the geometry of the bridge. I felt my pulse tighten in rhythm with the distortion, as if the night itself was syncing with my fear. The line, you will cross and nothing will be the same. The radio crackled, low and insistent. I could feel it vibrating through the seat, through my bones, pulling me forward. My hands gripped the wheel, knuckles white, and I felt the first true stab of terror. This wasn't just a road anymore. It wasn't just a bridge. It was a threshold, and I was being pushed across it. I tried to slow down, but the tires didn't respond as they should have. The asphalt rippled under the headlights, rising and falling in impossible waves, bending beneath me. I was moving, but I wasn't. Time itself seemed to stretch, the seconds folding over themselves, echoing back as distorted whispers in my mind. Look left, look right, what waits, you know? I obeyed without thinking. My eyes darted to the edges of the bridge, searching for shapes that didn't belong. Shadows lurked where there should have been none. Water that should have flowed reflected the sky, as if it were a mirror, yet the reflection moved independently, showing shapes and faces I didn't recognize. My stomach knotted. I swallowed hard, tasted bile, and tried to remind myself that this was impossible. But it wasn't impossible. It was happening, and I was part of it. The radio hissed again, calm, patient. Do not stop. Do not turn. The path is yours. The choice is made. I realized with a cold, sinking certainty that the voice wasn't just predicting. It wasn't guiding. It was merging with the night, becoming part of the landscape, becoming part of me. Every thought, every breath, every heartbeat it named, it twisted into action. I tried to resist. I tried to fight, but there was no fighting it. Resistance was impossible. The bridge curved impossibly, the far side disappearing into mist that seemed almost alive. I could hear water below, but it sounded wrong. Deep, slow, heavy. The air itself felt like it was breathing. My hands trembled as I pressed forward. Tires crunching on the warped surface, moving toward a place I couldn't see and didn't want to. You fear, you hesitate, you remember everything you have avoided. My mind reeled. The bridge was no longer a bridge. It was a corridor of memory and fear. Every plank, every railing, every shadow a mirror for the things I tried to bury. Faces of the past flashed in the mist. Faces I had failed. Faces I had ignored. Faces I had abandoned. I wanted to scream, but the night swallowed sound. I wanted to stop, but the asphalt beneath me shifted like liquid, carrying me forward. Reach the end. You must do not falter. I gritted my teeth, forcing my gaze ahead. The far side shimmered now, a faint glow that seemed to breathe in rhythm with my pulse. Shapes moved within it. Shapes I couldn't identify. Shapes that made my stomach turn. I couldn't tell if they were shadows or remnants of memory, projections of the mind, or entities waiting for me to arrive. You are here, and yet you are not. Your fear is yours, and yet it belongs. I felt it then, the shift. The radio vibrated in my hands, not just sound now, but presence. Words no longer mattered. Commands no longer mattered. The night, the bridge, the warped reality itself. They were speaking to me directly, threading into my thoughts, unraveling my sense of self. I thought about my father again, how he had always told me the world was orderly, that justice and logic could contain the chaos. He didn't know this. He didn't know that the world could twist like this, that a road could become a living thing, that the night could know me, name me, manipulate me, step forward or turn back. But no, the choice is illusion. I felt the weight of my own mind pressing down, twisting with the night. I wanted to look away, to flee, to abandon the vehicle, to scream, but I couldn't. The bridge had me, the night had me, the radio had me, and the voice was not a tool, not a machine, not a person. It was the threshold itself, and I had crossed too far to retreat. The far edge of the bridge drew closer. Shapes in the mist became clearer, yet no clearer. Faces, fragments, glimpses of lives I hadn't touched, moments I hadn't prevented, shadows of choices I had not made. Each one pressed against my mind, a wave of emotion that threatened to drown me. You will see and you will know, and the line will not forgive. I felt tears on my cheeks, hot and unwelcome, as I drove forward, every sense screaming that this was not a road, not a bridge, not a reality I could comprehend. The tires gripped the warped asphalt, carrying me toward a place that was both real and unreal, both terrifying and intimate, a mirror of everything I feared and everything I had become. The glow at the far edge shimmered brighter, shapes moving within it, and I realized with terror that I could not speak, that this wasn't a destination. It was a revelation. The bridge, the night, the warped reality, they were all part of me, and I was part of them. Embrace or resist, the night remembers, the night watches, and the line waits. I exhaled, hands shaking, heart hammering. Every instinct screamed to flee, to escape, to deny it. But I knew that I couldn't. I was no longer just a witness. I was a participant. Every choice, every fear, every heartbeat had been noted, measured, woven into the impossible geometry of this bridge. I drove forward into the glow, into the mist, knowing that when I reached the other side, nothing would be the same. Not the road, not the night, not me. I was crossing the line, and there was no turning back. The radio never stopped. I had stopped, or at least I thought I had. I had tried to drive away from the bridge, away from the warped stretch of highway that had turned the night into something unrecognizable. I had tried to shut the radio off, to ignore it, to close my eyes and pretend the voice had been a fevered dream. But it was still there. Static. Low. Insistent whispering, breathing. Unit 3, you are here and yet not. The line is permanent. I pressed the dial, flipped every switch, yanked the cord out. Nothing. The hum persisted. Quiet first, then rising like a tide, curling into my chest and lungs until I felt it in my bones. My hands shook. My eyes burned. Every nerve screamed that I should run, that I should leave the car, leave the bridge, leave the night entirely. But my body refused. Or maybe I refused. I thought about speaking into it, asking it to stop, to let me go. I opened my mouth, but no words came out. Not a whisper. Not even a thought that could form sound. The voice was stronger than me. Insistent, patient, unyielding. Listen, watch, obey forever. The bridge, the highway, the warp reality. It had become a trap, a loop, a corridor with no exit. I couldn't tell if I was moving forward or backward, if time still existed in a linear way, or if I was just suspended inside its black pulse. The asphalt shimmered beneath my tires, bending and twisting, folding over itself. The guardrail seemed to stretch like sinew, reaching toward the car as if to pull me in. I gripped the wheel, knuckles raw, and tried to force myself to think clearly, but clarity was gone. Shapes began to emerge in the mist. Faces I didn't recognize and faces I did. The ones I remembered, the ones I had failed to protect, all blended into the shadows, pressing close, just at the edge of my vision. They whisper my failures back to me, naming them, twisting them. I wanted to look away, but I couldn't. Something in me needed to witness it, needed to understand, needed to obey. The child, the woman, the fallen. Remember, they are yours. I felt nausea twist through me, and yet I pressed forward. The tires hummed. The radio hummed. My own pulse hummed in time with it all. I realized then that I had no choice. Every fear, every hesitation, every memory of shame or guilt or regret, it had become fuel for this, for the bridge, for the night itself. The static swelled, rising in pitch, thickening, until it sounded like the walls of the world were vibrating, resonating with my very thoughts. I tried to shut it out, tried to cover my ears, tried to bury my face in my hands. But the voice reached in any way, naming my thoughts, predicting my actions, controlling me more than I even realized. You will not stop, you will not leave, you will become part of the static, you will belong. The mist around the bridge thickened, and I saw something impossible. The road ahead dissolved into nothingness, or perhaps into something else entirely. Shapes stretched upward, shadows bent around unseen corners, and I felt the edge of comprehension slip. I realized I wasn't just driving anymore. I was moving through a corridor of memory, fear, and inevitability. The world, as I knew it, had stopped existing. I thought of my father again, the old sheriff, and wondered what he would have done. Would he have fled? Would he have laughed at my terror? But he didn't know this. No one did. And now neither did I. I was alone. Or maybe I had never been alone. The radio whispered again, soft now, intimate, coaxing me further into the impossible. Look, your hands, your heart, your mind, they are mine. Do not resist. I felt in my hands, shaking not from fatigue or fear, but from the pressure of the night itself, the bridge itself, the static that had become a living thing. My vision flickered, shifting between the real and the unreal, between what I knew and what the night showed me. I saw myself sitting at the station desk, staring at the radio, knowing what was coming. And yet I was here, and here was impossible. I tried to think, tried to find logic, tried to remember the world as it was. But every thought was intercepted, every memory folded into the static, every instinct drawn forward. I was no longer in control. The night was, the radio was, whatever this thing was, it had me. Unit 3, the end is beginning. Do not fight, you cannot. I realized then that I wasn't driving. I was being carried. The tires moved, yes, but my mind had no say. The radio hummed in my ears, alive with low, vibrating voices that named my name, my fears, my failures. And as I passed the edges of the bridge, the mist became thicker, swallowing the car, swallowing me, wrapping me in its cold, wet embrace. I tried to breathe. I tried to scream. I tried to resist, but it was pointless. The corridor of warped reality stretched endlessly in every direction, and I was nothing more than a visitor inside it, a witness to my own erasure. The voices became clearer, not just the one I had come to know, but many, layers of static, overlapping, whispering, echoing. He comes, he is ours, he is listening, he belongs. I felt my body pull apart from the world, weightless, unmoored. The wheel slipped from my hands. The headlights wavered, stretched into lines that bent back toward me. Shapes pressed close, faces in the mist, watching, waiting. The river beneath the bridge shimmered like mercury, reflecting nothing I could recognize. I realized then that I wasn't moving forward or backward. I was suspended. Forever, forever, forever. The radio spoke my name, again and again. Unit 3, Unit 3, Unit 3, until the words lost meaning, became mantra, became pulse. My chest throbbed with it. My ears rang with it. My mind hummed with it. And then, slowly and possibly, I felt myself dissolve. Not into air, not into darkness, but into the static itself. Every memory, every fear, every thought became part of it. I was aware, and yet I was gone. I remember the last thought I had, not of fear, not of struggle, but of inevitability, that this was the end, and yet it was only a beginning, that whatever had claimed me was patient, immortal, hungry for continuity. And then nothing. The car sat alone on the bridge, engine idling, tires still warm against the warped asphalt. The radio crackled, soft at first, then louder, spilling into the night, carrying fragments of my voice, my thoughts, my fears, my memories. It spoke in broken, fractured sentences, warnings for those who might come after. Do not follow the line. The night knows you hear me forever. Static hum between the words, low and insistent, like a heartbeat that belonged to the bridge itself. Somewhere inside it, I was there, not whole, not human, but present, waiting, observing, teaching. Future patrols would find it. The car, the bridge, the radio, still alive, still speaking, still warning, or maybe inviting. I couldn't know anymore. Time had no meaning. Place had no meaning. I was just signal and frequency, thought and pulse, echo and static. Unit 3 listens, Unit 3 watches, Unit 3 belongs. And as the first light of dawn crept along the edges of the river, it did not touch me. It did not touch the bridge. It did not touch the radio. It only illuminated the car, still parked, still humming, a ghostly beacon for those who might come next, who might hear, who might cross the line themselves. And the static continued. Forever. I remember the call like a knot tightening in my chest, the kind of memory that presses itself against your skull and refuses to let go. I was halfway through my night shift, the radio crackling low in the cab, the highway stretching in front of me like a black ribbon. The world outside was soft and empty, the fog rolling across the asphalt in thick, wet fingers. It was quiet, too quiet. And then the voice came, clipped and urgent, cutting to the hum of the engine. Unit 14, we've got a report of a truck. Speeding. Steep grade, unknown brakes. I felt my stomach twist. I'd seen plenty of accidents on that stretch. Steep grade, long descent. Trucks that got out of control, didn't stop politely. Most of the time, they ended in twisted steel, screaming and fire. And somehow, I had a feeling I was about to meet another one of those nights. I gripped the wheel tighter, knuckles white. Copy that. I muttered into the mic, but my voice fell hollow, swallowed by the dark that pressed against the cab's windows. Outside, the fog made the headlights of passing cars look like they were moving through water. By the time I hit the grade, I could already feel it, a tension in the air that didn't belong to weather or road. It was something else, something patient. The radio was quiet now, save for the static that hissed like it had secrets of its own. And then I saw it, a truck, blacker than the night itself, barreling down the slope at a speed that made the trees beside the road blur. Its lights were dim, struggling against the fog, and for a moment I thought my eyes were lying to me. That kind of speed shouldn't be possible for a vehicle that heavy, not on a wet road with brakes that... God, the thought made my stomach lurch. Might already have failed. I flipped on the siren, lights screaming into the mist, but the truck didn't slow. It didn't even glance at me, didn't acknowledge that I existed. It was a ghost, a force of momentum and steel, and I felt a cold finger of dread snake down my spine. I radioed it in, try and keep my voice steady, try and sound professional when my hands were trembling against the wheel. Dispatch, I have visual. Truck, black, heading southbound, way over the limit. Brakes unknown. Can't stop. My words faltered, caught in my throat as the truck's taillights winked like fireflies in the fog. There was something almost deliberate about the way it moved, as if it knew I was following. The grade dropped faster than I liked. My brakes felt useless against the pull of the slope, my pulse matching the rhythm of the rolling fog around me. Every turn felt like a trap, every shadow a warning. And the truck, always just ahead, almost impossibly fast, wasn't slowing. I thought about the drivers I'd known who lost control, how quickly things went from a routine night to disaster. It wasn't just the speed, it was the inevitability, the way gravity worked against you, how momentum had no mercy. And now, I was part of that story, a character in someone else's nightmare. Dispatch tried to calm me, their voice clipped and steady, but there was an edge in it, too. Fear is contagious, especially over radio. Unit 14, maintain distance. Do not attempt to pass. Monitor traffic. I nodded, even though they couldn't see me. I tried to focus on the road, on the rhythm of the tires on wet asphalt, on the dim reflection of the guardrails that curved like the spine of some great, sleeping beast. But my eyes kept drifting to the truck, to the way it seemed to devour the road, eating distance like it was nothing. And then, for a heartbeat, it slowed. Not enough to matter. Just enough to remind me it existed, that it could be seen, that it could be stopped, but wasn't. I could feel something in the air, the smell of wet asphalt mixed with oil and fear. A low vibration traveled through the steering wheel, subtle but unmistakable. Mechanical panic. Something in that truck was alive in the wrong way, and I wanted to look away, wanted to pull over, wanted to pretend the radio had made a mistake. But the road doesn't forgive hesitation. I could see the ridge ahead, the part of the grade where the road dips and curves, where the shadows collect and stretch like they were alive. I knew accidents happened there. Trucks would jackknife, cars would spin out, and yet the truck didn't falter. It seemed to glide, untouchable, like it had mastered the laws that governed the rest of us. I followed, my siren echoing into the mist, the sound bouncing off the hills like a warning that nobody wanted to hear. My stomach was tight, my chest heavy, my breath short, and all the while, the truck moved like it had a mind of its own, as if it were chasing something, or maybe running from it. My radio buzzed again, a static-laced voice breaking the tension. Unit 14, advise your location. I swallowed hard. Southbound grade, approaching Ridgecrest curve. Truck still speeding. Brakes unknown. Please advise. There was a pause, a hesitation I could feel even through the speakers. Then, keep distance. Back up on route. I nodded again, though the truck didn't care about backup. It never did. I felt my hands tighten on the wheel, felt my teeth clench as the curve approached faster than they should. Every instinct screamed at me to stop, to pull over, to let the nightmare pass. But you can't just let it pass. Not when people die if you hesitate. The fog thickened. My headlights barely cut through it. A thin smear of white against the black. The truck silhouette grew, larger now, more defined. Its sheer size made the road shrink, made me realize just how small we all were in the face of something that powerful, something uncontrollable. And then the lights, headlights on the truck itself, a sudden glare that made my eyes sting. I blinked, trying to focus. But for a second, I wasn't following it anymore. I was falling behind. My chest tightened, panic creeping in, and I realized just how much I had underestimated it. How much I had underestimated the slope, the speed, the inevitable physics of a runaway vehicle. I pressed my foot down harder, but it was futile. The truck didn't slow. and the road curved more sharply than my mind wanted to acknowledge. My hand shook as I gripped the wheel, knuckles burning, sweat stinging my eyes. I wanted to scream, wanted to call it off, but the radio was silent now, as if it had given up on me too. For a moment, I felt frozen, suspended in that space between control and chaos. I could almost imagine the lives that might end tonight, almost imagine the twisted metal, the smoke, the sound of tearing steel. My own heartbeat roared in my ears, echoing the sound of the truck's tires screaming against the asphalt. And then a strange thought hit me. It wasn't just speed. It wasn't just gravity or brakes or physics. There was something deliberate about it, something that made the truck feel less like a machine and more like a living thing, hunting, testing, pushing me to the edge. I swallowed hard, my throat dry, and told myself to focus. Focus on the road, on the grade, on survival. But the fog pressed against the windows. The truck's massive shape loomed, and for the first time, I realized I might not make it. Not just tonight, maybe ever. Because sometimes you don't survive the road. Sometimes the road survives you. And as the truck disappeared into the curve, into the fog, I followed. I couldn't stop. I couldn't look away. The siren howled, my own voice trembling through it, and I knew the night was only beginning. The call had been simple. The call had been urgent. But no one had warned me about the feeling that followed it. The creeping, suffocating certainty that whatever came next, I would never see it coming. And that's how it always starts. With a call, a sighting, a sound over the radio. And by the time you realize the danger isn't the road or the fog or the speed, it's already inside you. I can still feel the weight of that night pressing on me, like a hand I couldn't shake off. After the call, after seeing that truck tear down the grade like it was alive, I couldn't stop thinking about it. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw it again, black and massive. Headlights cutting to the fog, moving with precision that no human or machine should have. I slid back into my cruiser, the engine growling under my hands, and I told myself it was just a vehicle, just a runaway truck. Logic, reason, but deep down I knew it wasn't. Something about it had a presence, a will, and now it was mine to follow. Or maybe it was following me. I couldn't tell which. I pushed the siren off for a moment, letting the night wrap around me, thick and suffocating. The road was slick with mist, the fog curling into the headlights like smoke from a fire I couldn't see. My pulse hammered in my ears, my knuckles tight around the wheel, and I realized something chilling. The truck seemed to know where I was. Every curve I tried to cut, every turn I tried to take to intercept it, it anticipated. It moved with an almost playful cunning, like it was toying with me. I radioed dispatch again, my voice uneven. Unit 14, I'm following. Truck, still uncontrollable. Southbound Ridgecrest stretch. It's... My words caught in my throat, the sight of it turning my stomach cold. It's moving like it has a mind of its own. Silence. Just static. The kind of static that makes you lean forward, straining, waiting for a sound you hope won't come. Then a voice, low and measured. Unit 14 maintains safe distance. Backup is en route. Do not engage directly. Do not engage. Those words felt hollow, meaningless. I couldn't disengage. Not when the thing ahead was a living nightmare on wheels. The highway twisted beneath me. Wet lines reflected my headlights like silver scars. The fog swallowing everything beyond the edge of the road. I could feel the gradient of the slope, the pull of gravity that made the cruiser shiver under my hands. And the truck? It was always just far enough ahead to taunt me, just close enough to make my heart race, just distant enough to make me question if I was even chasing it, or if it was leading me somewhere I didn't want to go. I thought about what it would be like to hit it, to ram, to force it into a stop, but the thought didn't last. My gut screamed no. This wasn't physics anymore, not ordinary physics. The truck didn't behave like trucks do. Brakes didn't matter. Speed didn't matter. The road didn't matter. None of it did. And suddenly, every law I trusted about motion and control felt like a lie. Fog swirled around the headlights. Trees blurred into gray shadows, bending and stretching in ways that made my stomach lurch. I blinked, trying to focus, and for a moment, I swore the road had changed. Curves I'd known from memory twisted into impossible angles. Dips that weren't there before, hills that seemed taller. And always just ahead, that truck, a black shape with a faint glow of its lights, moving with purpose, untouchable. I thought about the people inside that truck. Did they know? Were they screaming? Or was it empty? The thought clawed at me, a gnawing curiosity I didn't want to indulge but couldn't stop. I wanted to see the driver, to understand what was happening. But the closer I got, the more I realized I might not want the answer. Some things aren't meant to be known. My radio crackled again. Unit 14, be advised. Traffic is moving slow ahead. Exercise caution. Caution. I wanted to laugh, but it died in my throat. There was no caution to be exercised here. Not with a truck that didn't obey rules. That didn't obey reality. I gripped the wheel tighter, knuckles white, feeling the tremor of the engine under me as if it were afraid to. The curve ahead came faster than I expected. The sharp bend at Ridgecrest like the throat of a beast. I could see it now. The truck taking the curve with a precision that made my stomach sink. No human could do that. No human would dare. Tires hissed, gravel spat, and yet it emerged unscathed, almost floating, unhurt, untouchable. And I realized in what terrified me most. It wasn't just speed. It wasn't just danger. It was intelligence, malice, intent. The way it moved suggested planning, anticipation. It knew I was following, knew the road, knew me, and maybe, in some way I didn't understand, it was waiting for me to falter, waiting for me to make a mistake. My thoughts scattered, chaotic. Memories of other nights on the road surfaced. The accidents, the small misjudgments that ended lives. And now, I was replaying every one, every single detail, analyzing every choice I had made that could lead to disaster. And the truck, relentless, continued its impossible pursuit, a shadow among shadows, growing closer with every heartbeat. I wanted to reach out over the radio, to say something, anything, to someone who might understand. But what could I say? It's alive. It's hunting me. Who would believe that? It would sound insane. And yet, my skin crawled, my throat went dry, and every instinct screamed the truth I could not voice. The slope began to flatten slightly, the descent easing but not easing the tension. If anything, the slowing of the grade made the truck more terrifying. It wasn't struggling. It didn't need to. It moved with calm precision, unbothered by gravity or friction, by law or reason. And I realized then that I had stopped seeing it as a vehicle at all. I had started seeing it as a predator. And predators have patience. The night closed in further. Fog thickened into a wall. The world outside my headlights becoming a soft, gray void. I could feel the air damp against my face through the slightly cracked window, smell the wet asphalt and faint diesel. And always in the distance, the taillights glimmering like eyes watching me. I tried to rationalize. Maybe it was a malfunctioning vehicle. Maybe the brakes had failed and the driver was unconscious. But every time I entertained that thought, the truck would move, would adjust, would act with an awareness that no human could muster. And suddenly, logic felt cruel, like it was dangling me over an abyss, teasing me with false safety. I pressed my foot harder, urging the cruiser to match it, to catch up. Tires slipped, gravel kicked up, my stomach turned with a sensation of speed. And then, as the radio fell silent, I noticed a quiet, beyond the engine, beyond the wind, beyond the tires. It was a silence that weighed, that pressed down on me. And in that silence, I realized something. It wasn't just the truck I was following. I was following fear itself. The night had taken shape, and it was using that truck as a vessel, as a way to pull me deeper, to test me. And the moment I let go, even for a second, the road would swallow me whole. I thought about quitting, pulling over, walking away. But there's a part of you, maybe stupid, maybe brave, that can't. You're drawn to the edge, compelled to see the end, to confront the impossible. And so I followed every curve, every dip, every impossible movement. And every time I thought I was closing in, the truck would shift, glide, almost mockingly, staying just ahead. The hours stretched. Minutes felt like years. And in that endless pursuit, I began to notice things. Shadows that weren't shadows, shapes that flickered at the edges of my vision, the faint sense of movement where nothing should have been. The road wasn't empty. The fog wasn't empty. And neither, I realized with chill that went straight to my bones, was I. Something was riding with me, watching, waiting, and maybe it had been there all along. The truck disappeared once more into fog, and I followed blindly, engine roaring, lights cutting through the gray. My chest burned, my hands ached, my mind reeled, but still I chased, because that's what you do when the impossible runs before you. You chase, even when your heart tells you run, even when every fiber of your being screams to stop. I didn't know where it would end. I didn't know if I would survive the night, but I knew one thing. Whatever this was, whatever had taken form in steel and shadow, it had chosen me, and no matter how fast I drove, how hard I tried, how desperately I prayed for dawn, I couldn't escape it. I hit the curve and almost lost control. My hand shook on the wheel, my teeth clenched, and my stomach lurched as if the road itself had turned into some living thing writhing beneath me. The slope was steep, sharper than I remember from the maps or the years of patrolling this stretch. And there, ahead was a truck, or at least it had been. 1 second, there was a black silhouette in the fog, massive, impossible, alive. The next, nothing. I blinked. My headlights cut through the mist, searching, desperate. The road twisted into a gray blur, the fog pressing in, wet and heavy. I slowed instinctively, afraid I'd misjudged the curve, afraid I'd hit a patch of slick asphalt. But there was no truck. Dispatcher's voice came over the radio. Calm. Too calm. Unit 14, report. Do you have visual? I swallowed, my throat dry. Negative. Truck, gone. I don't know where it went. Southbound Ridgecrest, it just disappeared. Silence. Static. A subtle pause that made the hair on my neck rise. Unit 14, maintain caution. Back up en route. I nodded, even though they couldn't see me. My pulse was hammering in my chest, a frantic rhythm I couldn't slow. I pressed forward cautiously, scanning the road, scanning the trees, the fog, the shadows. Nothing, just a slick asphalt and the dim glint of my headlights on guardrails. And then I saw it. A single black streak burned into the pavement, the residue of a tire track, jagged, scorched. The smell hit me first, a faint, acrid smoke that made my eyes water, the stench of something burning long ago but never gone. My stomach turned. My mind screamed at me to look away, to pull over, to pretend I hadn't seen it. But I couldn't. It was impossible. Trucks don't leave tire tracks like that without a crash, without friction and fire and metal tearing itself apart. And yet here it was, a trail burned into the curve like a warning. No debris, no twisted metal, no smoke rising into the sky, just a track. I ran my hand over the wheel, trying to steady myself. My mind was racing, grasping for explanations. Maybe the driver had swerved off the road. Maybe it jumped into a ditch. But there was no ditch deep enough to erase a truck that size. No slope, no bank, no shadow of reality could swallow it whole. And yet, I knew I hadn't imagined it. The fog pressed against the windshield, condensation forming little streaks like veins. The world narrowed the curve to the burned track, to the way my pulse drummed in my ears louder than anything else. I felt the weight of it, the impossibility, the creeping certainty that I was dealing with something beyond reason. I radioed again, voice trembling. Dispatch, there's a burned tire track at Ridgecrest Curve. Truck, it's gone. No wreckage. Nothing. There was a long silence. Static hissed. Unit 14, backup will arrive shortly. Do not attempt pursuit. Exercise caution. Caution. I laughed quietly, a bitter, dry sound. There was nothing cautious about this night. Nothing rational. I gripped the wheel tighter, the leather biting into my palms, and pressed forward. Every instinct screamed that I was chasing a ghost, a shadow. But if it was still out there, if it was still moving, I had to follow. The curve seemed endless. The burn track faded slightly, but the scent lingered in the air, a phantom of fire and rubber that made my stomach twist. I thought about the truck, about its impossible speed, about the way it seemed to anticipate me, to toy with me. Now, gone, leaving only a trace, it felt almost personal, like a message written in smoke and asphalt. You cannot stop me. I slowed further, creeping along the road, scanning the fog for any hint of movement. My lights glinted off something metallic for a second, a reflection too precise to be random, and I swerved instinctively. But there was nothing there. Just shadows, just a fog, just the oppressive weight of the night pressing on all sides. I remembered a story from my early days on this road. An old-timer who swore he'd seen trucks vanish in the fog. Engines humming, lights fading, leaving nothing behind. I had dismissed it then. A drunk driver's tale, nothing more. But now, staring at that burned tire track, I realized maybe he hadn't been lying. Maybe the night had a way of taking things, swallowing them whole, and leaving the living to wonder if they'd ever existed at all. The curve straightened, the road flattening slightly, but the tension didn't ease. I felt in my chest, a tight, pressing weight, the way fear twists you into knots you can't unravel. I could almost feel the truck behind me, or ahead of me, or maybe nowhere at all, just a memory of its presence, chasing me from the edge of perception. I thought about stopping, pulling over completely, shutting off the lights, letting the fog cover me. But I couldn't. Something in me demanded I continue, demanded I find out if it was real, demanded I see it again. My hands shook as I gripped the wheel, knuckles white, sweat running down my temples. Every instinct told me this was insane. Every rational thought told me to turn back. But rational thought had no place here. Not tonight. I ran through the possibilities, the explanations, the ways to justify what I had seen. Maybe the truck had an engine malfunction. Maybe it had swerved into a ditch I couldn't see. Maybe there was some other vehicle ahead, masking its presence. But each explanation fell apart the moment I tried to hold it in my mind. Nothing fit. Nothing made sense. And the burned track, so perfectly scorched into the asphalt, mocked me, proof that logic didn't apply here. My thoughts turned darker. What if the truck had never been real? What if my mind had conjured it, a manifestation of fear or exhaustion or some hidden trauma I'd never faced? But no, too vivid, too tactile, too alive. The sound of the tires, the rumble in my chest as I followed, the way the road seemed to react. It had been real, and now gone. It left only terror in its wake. I pressed on, headlights cutting a swath through the gray. The burned track began to fade, but the memory of it stayed, etched into my vision, burned into my mind. The night had changed, and I could feel it. The fog was thicker now, the shadows longer, stretching across the road like fingers reaching for me. I felt the cold brush of something unseen against my face through the open window, the subtle weight of eyes I couldn't see. The road seemed endless. Each mile stretched, twisted, and bent in ways that made me question my own perception. I thought about the truck, about what it was, about what it wanted. And the more I thought, the more I realized that maybe I didn't want to know. Some things are meant to pass, to vanish, to leave only scars and burned tracks behind. And yet, a part of me couldn't let go. A part of me followed the curve, drove forward, searched for a glimpse, a sign, anything that could tell me it hadn't just been a nightmare. The weight of that obsession pressed on me, a constant reminder that fear has a way of chaining itself to you, that once it finds a foothold, it never lets go. I thought about other nights, other calls, other vehicles lost in the dark, and I realized something. This wasn't just a truck. This was the night itself, taking shape, testing me, showing me how fragile I was, how small, how powerless. And the burned tire track was the only proof that it had been there, that it had existed, that it had passed through my world without a sound, leaving only the evidence that something impossible had occurred. The fog pressed in, thicker now, damp against the windshield, cold against my skin. I slowed again, breathing hard, sweat and fear mingling in my chest. I looked back, half expecting to see the headlights, half fearing what I might find. But the road was empty, just asphalt, just fog, just shadows that seemed to whisper and shift. And in that emptiness, I realized the truth. The crash had never happened. The truck had never crashed. It had simply vanished, leaving me alone with the road, the fog, and the memory of something that defied explanation. And I knew, with a clarity that made my chest tighten, that it wasn't over. Not tonight. Not ever. I pressed on, following the curve, following the road, following the ghost of what had been there. The burned track faded completely, but the fear remained, a constant weight, a reminder that the impossible is always just one curve away. And as the night stretched on, I understood something I couldn't ignore. Some things leave traces, some things vanish, and some things chase you long after they've disappeared. I couldn't sleep, not after that night, not after the curve and the burned tire track that shouldn't have been there. I kept replaying it over and over, the impossible speed, the fog, the way the truck had moved like it had a mind of its own. I could still see it in the shadows, headlights slicing through gray mist, a predator on wheels. By morning, the adrenaline had worn off, leaving only exhaustion and a gnawing unease. I thought maybe daylight would make sense of it. Maybe sunlight could rationalize what had happened. But reality, I was learning, doesn't always care about daylight. The sheriff's office called me in. They wanted me to report everything, every detail, every observation. I wrote it down slowly, word by word, like I was afraid if I skipped anything, the memory would slip away entirely. I described the slope, the ridgecrest curve, the impossible speed, and the black truck that had vanished. I even noted the burned tire track. When I finished, the sheriff leaned back in his chair, brow furrowed. He wasn't a man easily shaken, but even he looked at me like I'd told him something unholy. Unit 14, he said slowly. You're sure about this? About the truck? I nodded, every detail. I followed it, saw it vanish. There was a burned tire track at Ridgecrest. Something happened out there. He rubbed his temple. We ran the numbers. Checked registration, DMV, every shipment log for that route. Nothing. No truck, no driver, nothing. My stomach sank. I felt the blood drain from my face. What do you mean, nothing? He looked at me with that strange mix of disbelief and concern. It doesn't exist. Officially, at least. No record of a truck fitting that description. No deliveries scheduled. No driver on file. I stared at him, dumbfounded. I thought about the roar of the engine, the weight of the vehicle, the way it had dominated the road, the anticipation in its movement. It had been real. It had to be real. And now nothing. Check with the other units. I said, trying to stay calm. Someone must have seen it. Someone must have chased it. He shook his head. All patrols report nothing. No sightings. No communications about runaway vehicles matching your description. You were the only one. I felt my chest tighten. Fear curled in my stomach, heavy and insistent. I thought about the burned tire track. I thought about the curve. I thought about the way it had felt alive. And suddenly, the thought hit me. What if it hadn't been a truck at all? What if the driver hadn't been real either? The idea made my hands shake. I remembered the curve, the way the vehicle had moved with a cunning, almost malicious precision. A phantom, not a truck, not a driver. Something else, something that had taken shape, just long enough for me to see it. I tried to tell myself I was imagining things. Maybe exhaustion, maybe fear, maybe stress had warped my perception. But then I remembered the burn track. It was proof. Something had been there. And now, all I had was memory and a faint stench of rubber and fire in my mind. I went back to Ridgecrest Curve later that day, alone, walking the asphalt where the tire had scorched. My boots echoed softly in the fog that had rolled back in, thin but insistent. I looked for remnants, anything, bits of metal, fragments of tire, but the road was clean, nothing but gray asphalt and the creeping fog. I crouched, running my fingers over the blackened streak, but it faded entirely, not worn away, not erased, vanished, like it had never existed. My stomach twisted, my mind raced. How could something leave a mark so vivid, so undeniable, and then disappear entirely? I thought about calling someone, a scientist, an investigator. anyone who could explain this. But what could they say? It sounds insane even in my own head, and yet the fear lingered, a low hum that wouldn't stop. Something had been there, and something had vanished. But maybe it hadn't just vanished. Maybe it was still out there, waiting, watching, moving in ways I couldn't comprehend. Back at the station, I ran through the records again, hoping, praying to find an error. Maybe a misplaced log, a misfiled document, a simple clerical mistake. But everything was perfect, pristine. No truck, no driver, no accident reports, no insurance claims, no witnesses. It was like the night itself had swallowed the event whole. The sheriff noticed my agitation. "You look like you've seen a ghost," he said quietly, almost to himself. I laughed bitterly. Maybe I have. Maybe it was a ghost truck, a phantom driver, something unreal. But I saw it. I followed it. And now it's gone. Just gone. He frowned but didn't respond. I could tell he was thinking, trying to rationalize, trying to find a logical explanation. But I knew what I had seen. I couldn't unsee it. The memory haunted every blink, every shadow, every curve of the road I'd ever driven. Over the next few days, I tried to sleep, to eat, to function. But every sound, the creak of the house settling, the rustle of leaves outside, the distant hum of engines, made me tense. My dreams were worse. I'd see the curve in the fog, the headlights, the black mass, and I'd wake up gasping, drenched in sweat, my heart hammering like it wanted to escape my chest. And I started noticing things. Small things at first. Shadows that seemed too long. Tires on the road that didn't belong to anything visible. Shapes in my peripheral vision that vanished when I turned my head. My own reflection. Sometimes looking back at me with a weight I didn't recognize. The line between reality and memory blurred until I wasn't sure if I was chasing a phantom or the phantom was chasing me. I went back to Ridgecrest one more time, flashlight in hand, trying to convince myself it was all in my head. The fog wrapped around me like a living thing, curling into the cracks of the pavement. I followed the curve slowly, step by step, and then I saw it, or something like it. A faint glimmer, like the reflection of headlights, far off in the mist. I froze. My pulse shot up. Could it be? Could it have returned? I want to call it, to shout, but my voice caught in my throat. The air was thick, damp, cold. Every instinct screamed at me to run, to leave the curve, to never come back. But I couldn't. I needed to know. The glimmer vanished before I could step closer. Just a flicker, a tease, a reminder that whatever had been there, whatever had moved like a living thing on that road, wasn't done. And maybe it never would be. Back at the station, I tried to make sense of it. I tried to tell myself I was safe, that it was gone, that the world was rational and the laws of physics still applied. But the memory of that truck, of the burned track, of the impossibility of it all, haunted me. It wasn't just a truck, I realized. It was a presence, a shape of fear made flesh. And fear, well, fear doesn't vanish. Not really, not completely. I began to wonder if anyone would believe me. The records didn't exist. The truck didn't exist. And the driver? Perhaps a phantom. Perhaps a shadow, a thought given shape in the fog. Maybe it had never been real in the way I understood reality. And yet, I knew it had been there. I had seen it, smelled it, felt it pressing down on me, testing me. Even now, I feel it sometimes. In the corner of my eye, in the fog that creeps over the asphalt in my dreams, in the weight of the night pressing against my chest when the world is quiet. The truck may not exist in any official record, but I know the truth. I know what I saw, and part of me knows it isn't done. Part of me fears it never will be. I answered the 911 call like I always did, half automatic, half cautious. The voice on the line had been distorted, the kind of static that makes your stomach sink before you even know why. No yelling, no screaming, just a soft, trembling, "Help, please." And then nothing but a click. Dead air. I knew the area. Everyone called it a hollow turnoff. A jagged stretch of road that cuts through the forest like a scar. The GPS led me down narrow, twisting asphalt, the kind that disappears under shadows by sundown. I glanced at the dash clock. Almost 7 p.m. The sky was bruising orange, fading to deep violet. The smell of wet pine hit me first, sharp and bitter. Rain from earlier left the ground slick, the trees dark and glistening. I turned on the siren for a second, just enough to announce my presence. But the silence swallowed it whole. Not a car in sight, not a living soul. The cabin wasn't far, just past the bend where the road narrows and the forest seems to lean inward like it's listening. It was small, made of rough-hewn logs, with a porch sagging under the weight of years and neglect. The windows reflected the last of the sun, so bright I could barely see inside. And yet, the air around it felt wrong. Heavy, waiting. I parked and grabbed my flashlight, the beam slicing through the early shadows. Every step on the wet gravel felt too loud. The forest around me was quiet, unnaturally quiet. No birds, no rustle of small animals. Nothing but the wind threading through the pine needles. My stomach twisted. I could feel it before I saw it. The absence of life. I reached the porch. The door was unlocked, swinging slightly with the wind, creaking like it was warning me to stay away. I pushed it open. The smell hit me first. Dust, damp wood, and something else. Something faint but sharp, almost metallic. My flashlight swept across the room. It was empty. The table was set with 2 chipped mugs, a small plate with crumbs, as if someone had been there a moment ago. But the place was silent, empty, no signs of struggle, no footprints other than mine. I called out, my voice sounding hollow, swallowed by the thick walls of the cabin. Hello? Anyone here? Nothing. I checked the rooms one by one. The bedroom, small and dim, had a bed neatly made, clothes folded on a chair. The bathroom looked untouched. The air was stale, heavy with the scent of someone who had been here, but wasn't anymore. On the kitchen counter, I noticed a phone, corded, old, but plugged in. A dial tone hummed faintly. I lifted the receiver. Silence. Then, just as I was about to hang up, a faint click from the other end made me freeze. My heart picked up, the kind of rhythm that crawls up your chest and sticks there. I told myself it was the wind. I told myself the caller had hung up, but part of me didn't believe it. That soft, trembling voice was still there, echoing in my memory. Help, please. I went outside to check around the cabin. The forest stretched on all sides, thick and darkening. The rain had stopped, leaving a mist that clung to the ground and made the woods look like they were breathing. My flashlight caught something near the tree lean, a flicker of movement. But when I focused on it, there was nothing, just shadows dancing where shadows shouldn't. The cabin's porch groaned under my weight as I leaned against the railing, trying to shake off the unease. I pulled out my radio. Unit 4, nothing found on arrival, over. My voice sounded small in the mist. Silence answered back. I wandered the perimeter. Nothing. No footprints leading away, no signs of life. Just the thick, watching forest. The further I walked, the more I noticed it. The air felt heavier, almost alive. Every sound seemed amplified. My own breathing. My boots crunching on wet leaves. The distant drip of water from a branch. And yet, I kept thinking I heard someone moving behind me. A quick shuffle. A faint snap of a twig. But when I spun around, there was nothing. I wanted to leave. My instinct screamed at me to just get back in the car and drive. Call it a false alarm. But something kept me there. That voice. The helplessness. It felt like a thread pulling me in. A thread I couldn't ignore. I returned to the porch. My flashlight illuminated the cabin again. But this time the shadows inside seemed wrong. Not just dark, but shifting, curling like smoke. The edges of the walls blurred slightly, as if the room wasn't quite real. My chest tightened. I shook my head. I was tired, probably imagining things. Stressed from the long day. Nothing more. I heard it then. Barely. A whisper. So soft I thought it might be my imagination. I froze. The hairs on my arms stood straight. Help! The same voice. Clearer this time. Not coming from the phone. Not from the cabin. Somewhere deeper. Somewhere behind me. I spun. Flashlight cutting through the mist. Nothing. The forest stared back at me. silent and infinite. My pulse raced. The logical part of my mind told me to leave. The human part, maybe a little foolish, maybe a little stubborn, told me to follow it. The sound led me around the side of the cabin. Mud squished under my boots, the mist curling around my legs. I reached the back door. Locked. Inside, the darkness swallowed the room. And then I saw it, on the wall, written faintly in something dark, wet, fresh, maybe blood. It spelled out, "You shouldn't be here." I stumbled back, my flashlight trembling. My own breath came in sharp, ragged bursts. I wanted to tell myself it was a prank, some local kid messing with the sheriff. But the forest, it was watching. Every tree seemed alive, twisted toward me. The mist thickened, rising like smoke, and I realized I couldn't see more than a few feet ahead. The voice came again, louder, closer, desperate, pleading. "Help, please." I turned in circles, flashlight beams slicing the fog. The sound shifted, not coming from one place anymore. It moved, around me, behind me, in the trees. And then I noticed the footprints, dozens, circling the cabin, deep in the mud, but not human. Small, jagged, uneven. Something had been here. Something had been waiting. I backed toward the porch, trying to stay calm. I told myself stories, animals, echoes, nerves, but every instinct screamed that this wasn't right. My hand shook as I reached for my radio again. Unit 4, static, loud, screaming static, the kind that makes your ears hurt. The mist seemed to pulse with it, and then nothing, silence, complete suffocating silence. I was alone. The cabin sat behind me like a dark promise. The forest stretched endlessly ahead, and somewhere I knew the voice was still out there, watching, waiting, hoping I'd make the wrong move. I don't remember how long I stood there. Minutes, maybe hours. My mind raced with every horror story I'd ever heard. Every cautionary tale about cabins, about the hollow turnoff, about voices on the line that never led anywhere good. I wanted to leave. I wanted to run. But the fog, it wasn't just mist anymore. It seemed to move with me, curling around my ankles, whispering. And then, faintly, I heard it again, this time from the porch. The cabin door, the one I had left open, creaked softly. I didn't want to look. My rational mind screamed that I had to. My body froze in place, every muscle locked, every nerve screaming. Inside, the cabin looked the same as before. Empty, silent. The crumbs on the plate hadn't moved. The phone sat where it had always been. And yet, I felt eyes on me, watching, waiting. I stepped back. The door slammed shut behind me. Heart hammering. I fumbled for the keys to my car. Hands slick with sweat, shaking. The forest outside pressing closer, the mist thickening. Every shadow seemed alive, every sound amplified. I could feel the presence before I saw it. Then I heard it again, right at the edge of the porch. Not a whisper, a clear, desperate plea. Help me. I ran. Through the mud, through the mist, through the twisted, watching trees. My boots sank deep, my flashlight swinging wildly. The forest seemed endless, the hollow turn-off a phantom path that led nowhere. I didn't stop until I saw my headlights glinting through the trees. I don't know if anyone, or anything, was inside that cabin. I don't know if the voice was real. I don't know if I even want to know. But I'll remember it forever. The isolation, the silence, the eyes that felt like they were pressing into my skull. And the voice. Always the voice, soft, trembling, and impossible to ignore. I got back in my car. Engine roaring to life. Tires spinning on wet gravel. And as I drove away, the mist swallowed the hollow turnoff, hiding the cabin, hiding the forest, hiding whatever had been waiting. But I know it's still there, watching, waiting, and someday I know it will call again. I drove back the next morning. I shouldn't have, but something about that cabin, about the voice, had lodged itself into my chest, heavy and unrelenting. The sky was gray, low and oppressive, the kind that makes the world feel smaller, colder, like it's pressing down on you. Snow had fallen overnight, soft and thick, coating the hollow turnoff in white, smoothing the road and muting the forest. Everything looked calm peaceful even, but I knew better. I always knew better. When I parked near the cabin, the first thing I noticed were the footprints. They weren't mine. Fresh, deep impressions pressed into the snow, leading from the back porch and disappearing into the trees. Someone or something had walked there after I left. My stomach sank. My breath came fast, warm clouds in the cold air. I stared at them, memorizing every irregularity. They weren't human, not exactly. Too jagged, uneven in the spacing, sometimes long, sometimes short, like whoever made them was uncertain, hesitant, testing each step. I felt the urge to follow them, foolish and frightening all at once. My hand rested on the flashlight in the passenger seat. My radio sat uselessly beside me, chirping softly with static that sounded like it belonged in another world. I told myself to stay calm, told myself to be logical, but logic didn't explain the voice. Logic didn't explain the cabin door slamming behind me. Logic didn't explain the eyes I could feel in the dark. The snow crunched under my boots as I stepped onto the path. Each footprint seemed to pull me deeper, leading into the dense trees that loomed behind the cabin. The forest was quieter than usual. No birds, no squirrels, nothing but the softest of falling snow. The kind of silence that presses against your ears, makes your skull hum. Every instinct screamed at me to stop, to turn around, but I kept going. I had to know. I had to see. The footprints led me into the thick of the woods. Trees, tall and ancient, stood like sentinels, their branches heavy with snow. The light from the cabin faded behind me, leaving only the gray-white world of snow and shadow. The footprints twisted between trees, sometimes leading me straight, sometimes curling unpredictably like the path itself didn't want to be followed. My pulse thudded in my ears. Every step I took seemed amplified, each crunch a warning. I noticed other marks in the snow, small scuffs, like something had stumbled, fallen, or been dragged. I felt a familiar twist in my stomach. Fear mixed with that compulsive need to see. And then I heard it. Not the whisper from the cabin. Not quite yet. Something else. A soft sound, almost drowned by the snow. A footstep. Behind me, I froze. My flashlight trembled in my hand. The snow around me was pristine, except for my boots and the trail I'd followed. The sound came again. Slow, careful, echoing the rhythm of the footprints ahead. Whoever, or whatever, was behind me was following. My skin prickled, my neck stiffened, every nerve alert. I didn't turn. I couldn't. The instinct to look over my shoulder felt like it might pull me into something I wasn't ready to face. I moved forward again, faster this time, boots sinking into the snow. The footprints stretched ahead, deeper into the forest, leading me toward a darkness that seemed thicker than shadow. The trees crowded together, branches brushing against each other like fingers, whispering secrets I couldn't understand. The further I went, the more I felt watched. Eyes, countless and hidden, tracking me from every direction. Then I noticed it. The footprints weren't continuous. They disappeared at odd intervals, as if whoever left them had vanished mid-step, only to reappear moments later. My heart hammered. The snow, pristine and white, now felt like a canvas for something I couldn't comprehend. And yet, I couldn't stop following. I was drawn deeper, as if the forest itself was pulling me in. A gust of wind rattled the branches above, snow falling like rain, cold and sharp against my face. My flashlight flickered. For a moment, the woods seemed alive, moving. Shadows shifted at the edge of my vision, shapes that vanished when I turned to look. I told myself it was my imagination, but the footprints didn't lie. Something had been here, and it was still out there, watching, waiting. I stopped by a cluster of trees where the footprints split. One trail led further into a darkness, so dense it seemed unnatural, the kind of black that swallows the world. The other looped back toward the cabin, closer now, too close. My mind raced. Follow the deeper path and risk getting lost, or worse, or go back and confront whatever had followed me. I couldn't make myself move in either direction. That's when I heard it again, a soft whisper, barely audible, threading through the trees. Help! The same voice from the cabin, the same trembling plea. But now it was different. Closer, sharper, more desperate. I turned, flashlight swinging wildly. Nothing. The footprints didn't leave behind me. And yet, the sound came from all around me. From the snow, from the air, from the shadows. I realized then that I couldn't trust my senses. The snow, the trees, even my own mind. They were all playing tricks on me. Every instinct screamed at me to run. Yet my feet moved deeper into the forest. Step by step, I followed the prints, boots sinking, breath burning my lungs, heart threatened to escape my chest. I noticed something else then. The footprints weren't just irregular. They were growing larger. At first subtle, barely noticeable. Then unmistakable. Whoever or whatever had made them was changing, shifting. My stomach dropped. That voice, that pleading sound, was not human. And the forest, it wasn't human either. It moved differently than any living thing should. The snow thickened, rising above my ankles. I stopped. The footprints ahead vanished into a small clearing. Moonlight broke through the trees, pale and cold, illuminating something in the snow. Something that made my blood run cold. Small stones, arranged in a circle. In the center, a shallow depression in the snow. Like a body had been pressed there, and around it, the snow was disturbed, patterns that didn't make sense, spiraling, jagged, chaotic. I stepped closer, unable to tear my eyes away. The whisper came again, louder now, desperate, pleading. Help me! It was closer than ever, almost inside my head. I dropped to my knees, pressing my hands into the snow, trying to see if there was something, anything buried beneath. Nothing, only cold, untouched snow, disturbed by the footprints I had followed. And then I saw the trees. They weren't just leaning. They were bending, twisting slightly toward the clearing, like they had been watching, waiting. The shadows stretched unnaturally, curling around the clearing in a way that defied logic. I stumbled back, heart hammering, and realized the footprints leading here hadn't stopped. They'd circled the clearing, heading back toward the cabin, but something was off. The snow between them was pristine. No one had walked there, yet the tracks existed, clearly, impossibly, as if the forest itself had imprinted them. I sank to the ground, chest heaving, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. The voice persisted, just at the edge of comprehension. It wasn't a call for help anymore. It was a lure, a demand, a warning. I couldn't tell which. I wanted to leave. I wanted to run back to my car, to the road, to anything safe. But the forest, it had my attention and it had my fear. And in that fear, I knew I wasn't alone. I crawled back toward the path, away from the clearing, but the footprints followed, always just ahead, circling me, leading me deeper, teasing me. I stumbled over roots hidden beneath the snow, cold seeping into my bones, breath coming in ragged gasps. The whisper grew louder, insistent, now repeating my name. Help, help, help. I didn't know if it was my name or just the echo of the cabin. I didn't care. I ran through the snow, through the bending trees, through the shadows that seemed to close in around me. Every step I took, every breath. The forest pressed tighter, colder, alive with the presence of something that shouldn't exist. Finally, I saw the glow of my headlights cutting through the mist, the road opening up ahead. I didn't slow down. I didn't look back. The footprints vanished behind me, fading into the snow as if they had never existed. But I knew they were there, somewhere, waiting, watching. I reached my car, slammed the door, and locked it. Hands shaking, teeth chattering. I stared at the forest. The trees stood still now, the snow calm, the world silent. But I could still hear it. The faintest whisper carried on the cold wind. Help, please. And I knew I hadn't seen the last of it. I hadn't even scratched the surface. Whatever left those footprints in the snow was still out there, somewhere in the forest, circling, waiting, and it would call again. I shouldn't have gone back inside the cabin. My rational mind screamed at me to stay outside, to keep driving, to forget everything. But some stubborn, foolish part of me needed answers. Needed to know. The snow had melted slightly, leaving the porch slick and wet, and I almost slipped before I pulled the door open. The cabin smelled the same as before, dust, damp wood, and that sharp metallic tang I couldn't place. I gripped my flashlight tighter, the beam cutting through the gloom. Everything looked untouched since I'd last been here. The crumbs on the plate, the folded clothes on the chair, the corded phone humming faintly on the counter. Everything, and yet it felt different. The air was heavier, thicker, as if the walls themselves had swallowed the cold outside and were exhaling it slowly, deliberately. I moved to the center of the room and stopped. That's when I heard it. Soft at first, almost like a trick of the wind through the gaps in the logs. A whisper, indistinct, fleeting. I froze, my mind straining to catch it. Remember? I jerked my head toward the corners of the room, flashlight trembling. The voice was too familiar, too precise. It wasn't random. It knew me. The whispers grew, soft at first, like murmurs behind curtain, brushing my ears. I realized slowly, with a cold spike of fear, that the voices weren't talking about me in general. They were talking about me, about my past, about the mistakes I'd buried under the daily grind. The ones I'd told myself no one remembered. You left him. The words sliced through the air, low and deliberate. My stomach twisted. The voice echoed something I hadn't admitted to anyone, not even myself. A mistake from years ago, one I'd hoped had been forgotten, buried in the fog of time and duty. I told myself it was impossible, that I was imagining it, but the voice it knew. I shook my head, telling myself to focus. It's just the wind, I muttered aloud. But even as I said it, the whisper shifted, closer now, as if pressing itself into walls, into the very air I breathed. You could have stopped it. You should have stopped it. I swallowed hard. I remembered the night, the call, the hesitation, the choice I had made to prioritize one life over another, a decision I had justified 100 times to myself. And now, the cabin, these walls, were holding my shame up to me, repeating it, dissecting it, reminding me. I took a step forward, and the whispers moved with me. 1,000 fragmented voices, overlapping, all carrying the weight of my guilt, my fear, my failures. Names I'd hoped to forget, places I'd hoped never to return to, faces I'd failed, each one embedded in the air like dust, curling and twisting, whispering in tones that made my teeth ache. You're not good enough. The words weren't just heard. They sank in, pressing against my skull. I gripped the flashlight harder, feeling sweat bead at my hairline despite the cold. My reflection caught in the window. My face looked tense, drawn. My own eyes stared back, wide, hunted, and behind them, faintly, I thought I saw shapes, shadows that moved against the grain of the cabin's logs, darker than shadows should be. Do you remember her? I felt before I processed it. A pang, sharp and sudden. The name of a case I had mishandled, a life I hadn't been able to save. I hadn't thought of her in years, had buried the memory deep in a folder of the mind labeled "Don't touch this." And yet, here it was, whispered in the empty cabin, carried on the walls themselves. I stumbled backward, almost losing my footing on the wooden floor. The whispers shifted again, soft now, intimate, almost friendly, not friendly in comfort but in recognition. They knew my fears, my regrets, my private thoughts, the things I hid even from myself. You were scared. Yes, I admit it, my voice barely a whisper. My throat was tight, dry. I was scared. The words seemed to satisfy them, for a moment, and then the whispers returned, faster, sharper, almost mocking. Each sentence, each accusation, each fear I had tried to push away was now a chorus filling the cabin, pressing into my ears, pressing into my bones. You ran when you should have stayed. You left them behind. You lied to protect yourself. You failed again. I sank to the floor, shivering despite the warmth of the cabin, wrapping my arms around myself. My flashlight flickered, and when it settled, the shadows on the walls were moving. Not random, not like a trick of the light. Shapes stretched and warped, bending toward me, elongating with the cadence of the voices. They didn't just accompany the whispers. They seemed to illustrate them, carving the room into memory after memory I tried to forget. I remembered the accident, the fire, the child screaming. I had hesitated. I had made a choice. I had left a life behind. And now, the cabin reminded me, the walls reminded me, the very air reminded me. I could smell smoke, feel heat, even though nothing was burning. It was a hallucination, I told myself. Stress fatigue, my own mind turning on me. But the whispers knew, always knew, you're weak. I pressed my hands over my ears, trying to shut it out. It only grew louder, more insistent, as if my denial fed it. Each memory, each regret, was dissected, replayed, and delivered in voices I could not escape. And behind them, something else, a low hum, almost imperceptible, vibrating under the floorboards, under the walls, through the logs. I felt it in my teeth, in my skull, in the hollow between my ribs. I wanted to run, to leave the cabin, to escape. But something anchored me here. Fear? Curiosity? Shame? I couldn't tell. Every step I tried to take toward the door felt like moving through water, slow, resistant, pulling me back. The whispers shifted, following me, circling me, impossible to outrun. You remember the last time you failed? I froze. Yes, I remembered. How could I forget? My chest tightened. The past had never seemed so present, so alive. And now, it was here, whispering, shaping the air, living in the walls. I closed my eyes, tried to breathe, tried to convince myself it was just stress, just snow, just isolation, just my imagination. But it was too vivid, too precise. To me, you can't hide from yourself. I opened my eyes. Shadows crawled along the walls, shapes that weren't quite shapes, faces that weren't quite faces, memories twisting into new forms, impossible forms. And in the center of the room, faintly, I thought I saw something like a reflection, but wrong. Not me, something older, something wearier, something that had endured all my mistakes and mocked me for them. I wanted to speak, to tell the voices to shut up, to remind them they had no right. But my voice failed, my throat locked, my mind felt stretched, pulled thin by the sheer weight of it. Every whispered word cut into me, carved into me, rearranged the space I thought I occupied. You will fail again. I shook my head violently, standing unsteadily. My flashlight's beam swung wildly, catching the walls, the ceiling, the floor. Each flicker revealed more. Memories I had buried, failures I had justified, fears I had ignored. They were all here, pressed into the wood, breathed into the air. The cabin was alive with them, with me, and I felt the cold, creeping certainty that the whispers had always been here, waiting for someone to return, waiting for me. I stumbled back toward the door, finally reaching for the handle. The whispers slowed, paused, like they were curious, watching, judging. The cold air from the outside hit me like a slap, grounding me. I swung the door open and almost fell onto the porch, gasping. The cabin fell silent behind me. The walls held their secrets. The shadows receded. The air cleared. But I knew the memory of it. The voices, the whispers, the accusing gaze of my own past would follow me, would stay with me. They weren't just in the cabin. They were inside me now, pressing, whispering, impossible to escape. I got in my car. I didn't start the engine. I just sat, trembling, gripping the wheel. My reflection in the windshield looked back at me. Same eyes, same face. But something had changed. I had seen myself stripped bare, and I couldn't unsee it. I didn't drive away immediately. I stayed, staring at the cabin, waiting, listening, hoping, perhaps, that it would speak again, that it would let me understand why it remembered me, why it knew me, why it had called me back inside. And I knew, some part of me always had, that I would return, that the cabin, the whispers, the walls themselves would call again, because some mistakes aren't meant to be buried. Some voices are never meant to be silent. I woke before sunrise, the cold still clinging to the edges of the world outside my car. My hands rested on the wheel, knuckles white, and I stared at the forest where the cabin had been. The snow from yesterday had melted, leaving the ground muddy and uneven, but the spot where the cabin had stood was empty. Nothing, just trees, sloping earth, and a silence that pressed in like a weight. My heart hammered, my breath shallow. I rubbed my eyes, trying to convince myself it had been a dream, or that maybe the cabin had never existed. But I knew better. I had been inside. I had felt it breathe around me. The whispers had clawed at my memory, at my shame, at the mistakes I had buried under years of duty. The weight of it lingered, as if the air itself carried the echoes of the cabin's walls. I stepped out of the car. The ground was wet, the mud sucking at my boots. I wanted to mark the spot, to prove it had been real. But when I looked around, the world had shifted subtly. The road, my way back, seemed longer, twisted in ways I hadn't noticed before. The trees, familiar yesterday, now looked different, their bark darker, their shadows deeper, stretching farther than they should. I took a step forward, another, and then I saw it. Or rather, I didn't see it. The cabin, the place that had felt alive, oppressive, real, was gone. Completely. No logs, no porch, no windows. Only forest, stretching endlessly unbroken, as if it had never been there. My pulse raced. My throat went dry. I looked around, heart hammering, and the world outside my windshield, the road, the snow, the turnoff, was gone too. I was alone. The silence was different than before. Not peaceful, not still. It was expectant, watching, waiting. My boots sank into the mud, and I realized I had no bearings. The road should have been there, stretching behind me, guiding me back to the highway. But there was nothing, only forest, trees leaning inward, dark and twisted, pressing against the sky, which was low, gray, and heavy. I tried to call it in on the radio. Unit 4 dispatched, you copy? My voice sounded small, distant, swallowed by the thick air. Static hissed in reply, then silence. No crackle of response, no acknowledgement, nothing. I swallowed hard, tried to keep my panic at bay. My chest felt tight, the cold pressing through my coat and into my bones. I turned, scanning for any sign of the highway, the road, the familiar, but there was nothing, just the forest. My mind raced. I tried to retrace my steps from yesterday, to find the snow, the footprints, anything, but the ground was muddy now, unmarked, unbroken, as if I had never stepped here at all. The fear crept in slowly, like ice spreading over water. My heartbeat became loud in my ears. I wanted to run, to scream, to drive forward, backward, in any direction that made sense. But the sense was gone. The highway, the turnoff, even the cabin, it had all vanished. And with it, any certainty I had about where I was, or who I was supposed to be. I took a few cautious steps, trying to find anything familiar. The mud squished beneath my boots, the forest pressing closer with every move. I felt the cold wind whip around me, though the trees should have blocked it. It carried whispers again, soft, teasing, familiar, but not voices I recognized this time. Not exactly. Hints of echoes, fragments of phrases that made my stomach knot. I didn't want to listen, and yet I couldn't stop. Never leave. The words came from nowhere and everywhere. Soft, deliberate, almost affectionate in their insistence. My skin prickled. I wanted to respond, to argue, to remind them that I had left, that I had survived, that I was still here. But my mouth wouldn't form words. My body felt sluggish, like moving through water, like gravity itself was trying to hold me in place. I forced myself forward, taking slow steps through the mud, the forest, the oppressive stillness. Each tree I passed seemed to stretch taller, darker, its shadow curling toward me, leaving me trapped in a tunnel of black and gray. I tried to tell myself I was imagining it, that it was stress, exhaustion, the snow, the isolation, but deep down, I knew it wasn't imagination. The cabin hadn't disappeared. It had shifted me, displaced me. I walked and walked, but the forest stayed the same. I couldn't tell if I was circling or moving forward. The sky above pressed down, gray and low, and I felt a dizzying vertigo, a vertigo that made me stagger. My thoughts swirled. Was I still on the highway? Had I left it yesterday? Or had I crossed some invisible line, some threshold I couldn't recognize? The world had become uncertain, liquid, impossible. I stopped again, leaning against a tree, chest heaving. My hands were muddy, slick, cold. The whispers returned, softer now, almost comforting, almost familiar. Fragments of my own voice, my own thoughts, repeated back to me. Fear, regret, memory, shame, all layered over each other like a chorus. You can't leave, not yet. The words hit me in the chest. Not threatening, not cruel, but firm, insistent. I wanted to argue, to tell the forest, the cabin, the air itself that I could leave whenever I wanted. But I couldn't. The words weren't just in my ears. They were in my mind, embedded in my thoughts, pressing against the edges of my memory. I tried to run. My boots sank into mud with every step, the trees stretching and bending in ways that made navigation impossible. I turned in circles, dizzy, breath ragged. Every direction I tried led to more trees, more gray, more silence. I shouted, screamed even, my voice echoing back at me distorted, alien, unfamiliar. The whispers shifted. Now they weren't just phrases. They were memories, projections, visions curling at the edge of my sight. Shadows of the cabin flashed between the trees, walls, windows, a porch. But every time I reached for them, they dissolved into the mist and mud. My pulse raced. My head spun. My stomach twisted with the realization that I couldn't leave. That maybe I never had. I sank to my knees in the mud, shaking, hands pressed to my head. I tried to remember how I had arrived here. The 911 call, the cabin, the snow, every step I had taken. Every memory was layered now with something unfamiliar, something wrong. The cabin, the forest, the whispers, they had rearranged everything. My past, my present, my reality. Never leave, the voices said again. This time louder, closer, insistent. Not cruel, not playful, firm, certain. And I understood with a sinking certainty that they weren't wrong. The cabin hadn't disappeared. It had chosen to hide, to test, to trap, and I had walked straight into it. I tried to stand, to move forward, but the forest pressed in. Shadows bent and curled around me. The air felt thick, almost liquid, and my limbs felt heavy, unresponsive. I realized then that I didn't know where the highway ended or began. The turnoff, the road, the world outside, it was gone or irrelevant or waiting elsewhere. All that existed was this place, this forest, this liminal space, and the insistence that I could not leave. I sank back against the mud, head bowed, breath ragged. I tried to call it in again on the radio. The static was harsh now, screaming at me, then silence. Not silence like the forest, but empty, deliberate, as if even the world beyond couldn't reach me. My eyes closed, and in the darkness behind my eyelids, I saw the cabin. The walls pressed inward, breathing. The shadows moved. The whispers lingered. Never leave, they said again, and I knew I wouldn't be able to. Not yet. Not ever. Maybe hours, minutes, or moments passed. I couldn't tell. Time had no meaning here. The forest shifted subtly, slowly, impossibly. And I stayed. I stayed because moving felt impossible. Because leaving felt impossible. Because the cabin, the whispers, the walls, the space between reality and memory had decided. And I knew, deep in the marrow of my bones, that the cabin had never really been on the highway at all. That the road, the turnoff, the world I thought I knew was irrelevant. What mattered was here, now, and forever, until it decided otherwise. I don't know how long I sat there, but when I finally opened my eyes, the forest was unchanged. Silent, gray, oppressive, and I understood with a clarity that chilled me to my core. The cabin hadn't gone anywhere. It had just been patient, waiting, whispering, and now it was mine. I stood, boots sinking into the mud, breath ragged, heart hammering, and I knew that if I took one step outside, I would never see the highway again. But the thought didn't scare me anymore, because the whispers, the cabin, the forest, they were part of me now, and I was part of them.